Okay. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, where you are around the world. This is Sunday's live stream podcast. We discussed a lot yesterday, and a lot of it was to do with commentators and women in sport and equal pay. And Frank Kirby made an interesting point in a press conference in the build-up to England's Women's World Cup preparations for the French 2019 Women's World Cup. And she says if England win the World Cup, the debate about equal pay will be given some credence. And here's the thing. I've looked at some of my data, and I'm a sports channel, so I've looked at the data, and roughly 6 to 7% over the entire channel's history is female viewers, and in the last month, it's roughly similar to 6-7%. So let's say you had a stadium. There are some stadiums that are 100,000 seater capacity, and 6.5 to 7,000 of those fans are women. If that's an average, then you got to imagine if you were to get a women's game of the equivalent sport, if 6 to 7,000 people turned up, the sport's profitable. It doesn't. So if women were to get equal pay in global football, women's football will be bankrupted pretty quick. If the WSL was to give women equal pay to their male counterparts, the WSL will fold within a few days. It will be unsustainable. Until the crowds are big enough where they can get, make a profit, it's a suicidal idea. And that was a big discussion point yesterday. And you've got to look at the wages of male football players, and it's already unsustainable in the male game at lower levels. The wages that players are demanding is just not sustainable. How football can justify it is beyond me. But that's what we're faced with as sports fans, is the calls for equal pay. And while I do not doubt the effort and the integrity and the fitness levels improving and the skill level improving, the quality of the product that we see in women's sport is nowhere near comparable to men's sport in many respects. And it would be insane to expect it to be comparable. We do not have mixed football matches. We have women's football and men's football for a reason. It's the same with tennis. The only time you have mixed is mixed doubles. And the call for equal pay in tennis, how does that work? Apart from the mixed doubles, it doesn't work. And so for someone like Serena Williams, who's made the most money out of women's tennis, to say I deserve equal pay, you've already made a fortune. I feel sorry for those at the lower levels of the sport that are getting paid a pittance. Other news, England's cricket team lose to Australia. That's not really news, really. It's the injury concerns throughout the team. The captain's got a broken thumb. Paul Collingwood is going to have to play some games because they're short of players. So the Cricket World Cup preparations for England are not looking great. That's going to be interesting to see how they deal with the injury crisis that they've suddenly got, and players not being available for selection for a variety of reasons. That's going to be an interesting one. On the Tranmere Rovers side of things, because I can notice there's a Tranmere Rovers supporter in the live stream. Second promotion in 2 seasons. That's hard to do. They're back in League One. Obviously, I would think they've got to do it sustainably. This going up the league divisions, but they are the forgotten side of Merseyside, and I always say this: they're the forgotten side of the Northwest. They have a big fan base. For what the club of their level, they have a very big fan base, and they like playing at the new Wembley. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tranmere make a playoff push this coming season. I would say this though, as a sports fan, I would love to see another team from the Northwest, in the top flight or in the Championship and top flight and do really well and be successful. But it has to come, sustainably. We've seen so many clubs overextend themselves in various sports, and then it all goes, it all goes horribly wrong. If I could make a reference to rugby league, look what happened to the Bradford Bulls. They were a successful side, and the wheels fell off financially. They were badly run off the field. So if Tranmere are to progress through the league system and to get out of League One into the Championship and hopefully the Premier League, that's the promised land, right? They've got to do it sustainably. They have to do it sustainably. If they do not, then they risk going back down the league table and back down the leagues to where they were. I mean, I look at clubs like Swansea. I've got some friends who are Swansea fans, and I worry about Swansea's future. I look at Huddersfield. They've had their time in the Premier League. Have they overextended themselves, and what's going to happen to Huddersfield going forward? Fulham, big concerns about Fulham. Massive concerns about Fulham. The amount of money they spent in the last summer, and the fact they had one of the worst defences in Premier League history, and went through 3 managers. Worrying times. And sport, when it comes to the sports that I follow and the teams that I like, you will notice that football is not in my top 5 sports that I enjoy watching these days. There's a video of that on the channel from last summer. I decided to go, look, these are the sports that I follow and the reasons why. I'm really going off football. Now, I will cover the Women's World Cup, and I will cover the Euro qualifiers for England, and I will hopefully see Wales. We'll hopefully see Wales and Northern Ireland and the Republic and Scotland, make a push for Euros as well, because that'd be fun. And next year I will cover the Euros. That's going to be great fun next year, covering the Euros. It really is. But the concerns I have with football, you have to look at some of the transfer fees being demanded for players, and it's mind-boggling. And the debate about women's sport and getting equal pay. If women in football were to get equal pay, women's football would be bankrupted within hours, if not less, minutes. And Fran Kirby, while I appreciate her integrity and her raising the issue, there has to be the business side of it as well. If women's football is to be successful, it has to be profitable, and it's not profitable yet in a strong enough sense. My favourite sport is ice hockey. I'm a big NHL fan, a big ice hockey fan. I follow my local team, and I've been following my local team for years. One of my mates plays for the local hockey club, so I have a connection with the local hockey team here. I've got friends who play for the Windsor and Slough Knights. I've had friends who play for the Bracknell Hornets. I've had friends who also play for the Bracknell Bees. I've got friends who play the rec hockey, the Summer League, for various teams in the local area. So I have a connection with ice hockey that I think I have more with any other sport. I've got friends who play at the rugby club here in Bracknell. I've got friends who've played for some of the local football clubs. I've played in the local 5-a-side league. I've played for the local rugby club in their 3rd, 4th squad. So I have a connection with some of the local sports teams here. But football is going down the list of sports that I really enjoy. Now, I did say the World Cup would make or break my enjoyment of football, and it did improve. I think the World Cup was... I'm taking these glasses off. I can't see jack shit. I think, football did improve its standing with me, but I look at the wage demands of players and the transfer market and the overinflation of the transfer market, and it's killing the sport because the smaller clubs can't compete. The bigger clubs flagrantly, flagrantly breach financial fair play amongst other rules that are in place. UEFA has shown how out of touch it is with fans with the Europa League final and the hosting in Baku. So when people ask me why I do some of these football videos, it's a very popular sport for a lot of people. It's the most global sport there is. So if I wasn't to cover football on this channel, it would be pretty stupid. But I'm enjoying football less than what I was a decade ago. I'm enjoying football less than what I was when I was younger. Now that I'm nearly 30, I look at football now and I'm really scratching my head. And I'm looking at the sport that I once idolised, going, there are so many things wrong with it that are not being fixed, that I'm concerned. But I like ice hockey. I like rugby league as well. And I've obviously played rugby union. So I prefer those sports over football. I prefer like touring cars and rallycross and rallying and motocross over football. And football is struggling on my list of sports that I like. The World Cup did do something to repair that lack of enjoyment a little bit, and I'm hoping the Women's World Cup can be a positive for women's football. There are a lot of people slagging off women's football and female officials and coaches and pundits, but they're not any worse than a lot of the male referees, pundits, and players. I think actually they're more honest about where their sport is. We can discuss that later on if the questions get posted. Do I think we should Brexit football? No, I don't. I think the issues with football are more than just the UK leagues wanting to pull out of any European competitions. It's a much wider issue that covers the whole of Europe. The Champions League does have issues, absolutely. The Premier League money, and it's not just the Premier League; it's the big leagues in Europe. There are issues there with overinflated transfer market. I think the best league to be a fan of is the Bundesliga, because the fans have more say in how their clubs are run. I don't know. I think there are issues with the money absolutely ruining the game quite significantly, because if you go back to the 80s, the average salary for a player was 60 to 70 grand a year. And back then, if you equivalent that into real terms, that's really good money. But what's happened since, I don't think the German what works in Germany doesn't necessarily work in other countries. That's why it's the German system. If it was a perfect system, every country would have adopted it, and they haven't. And there's a reason for that. It does work in Germany because it's a cultural thing. It's been ingrained in the culture of German football clubs since before Hitler came along. So this has been a German thing since the 1920s. It's just the German way of doing things. It works for the German league. It doesn't work for everyone, and not every German club actually has fan ownership. It's just a lot of German clubs have fan ownership. So what works for one country does not work necessarily for another. And we have to be very, very careful of adopting a foreign model, because while the German youth system is brilliant, and they are, finding youth players that otherwise would have gone missed by, let's say, the French system or the Italian system or the Spanish, Portuguese, British. The Dutch youth system is amazing, yet the Dutch league, the Eredivisie, is nowhere near as good as what it was 20 years ago. Massive decline at the top level of Dutch football, but the Dutch youth system is brilliant. The best Dutch players do not play in Holland. So when a system works, it may work in part or in full, doesn't necessarily transfer to working in another league or another country. But I think more of the German system should be adopted by other leagues, absolutely, because we've seen with the Italian league and the amount of corruption there. We've seen with the Belgian league and the amount of corruption allegations there. The Spanish league and state aid being questionable. The French league being basically bought by PSG for eternity, and issues with the French league. And then we look at the Scandinavian leagues, and I think their model is pretty good, but bearing in mind the quality of player, the average attendance, the money involved, if you were to translate to the English system, it wouldn't work necessarily. It's all very nice cherry picking the nice bits, but there are negatives to every way a sporting system works. The issue I think I have here in the UK is, yes, the players are overpaid. There's not enough English talent playing in the English Premier League. Same with the Championship. That is an issue. But then bringing a rule saying you must have a minimum amount of English players and then a minimum amount of youth players, that makes it difficult, because they have to offload players and then players get thrown on the scrap heap. But I think with the issues politically that we have between the UK and Europe, we may see less European players coming over here to play. We may see less overseas players, which may be a silver lining where more English players get a chance to play. We may also see wages actually come down because of the less interest from Europe. We may see wages actually come down to more reasonable levels. What players like Danny Rose earn in a week, players in the top flight 30 years ago were earning in a year. That's how overinflated player wages and the transfer market has become with Sky Sports and the money and the TV deals and the globalization of the game. Player salaries were much more respectable and acceptable to the common man, and games were affordable to watch. Tickets for top flight football were actually affordable to the common working man, woman, and child. When you look at it now, no longer sustainable for the average fan. It is obscene. I completely agree that the ticket pricing in the Premier League and the Championship is not acceptable. And then you got to look at the ticket prices for the UEFA Europa League final. Well, I always call it the UEFA Cup for some reason, but the Europa League final, as it currently is, $5.5 grand for a Category 1 ticket. That's where it's becoming obscene. And I think UEFA have put the fans last, and it is a joke of an organisation. And now we have fans complaining to their clubs that they're also not doing enough to ease the passage to get there, to help with transport, if that means they have to put on transport or pay for transport. And clubs are now being, fans are angry at both Chelsea and Arsenal for not assisting them with getting to the the final. Half the tickets that were allocated have been handed back unsold. The amount of fans from the UK going is a pittance compared to the rest of the stadium. So the atmosphere is going to be lacking, and that could affect the game. I think these are two sides that have misfired over the last couple of seasons as teams and not played to their potential. And managers are under pressure. And yeah, there are things that are wrong. Absolutely. But Unai Emery, this is his competition. He's won it so many times with Sevilla. It is Unai Emery's competition. Sarri is a flawed genius, as I'll call him. But I fear that all the negativity surrounding the build-up to this final is going to overshadow the final itself. And maybe the final isn't the best game of football we ever see. But the fact that the atmosphere is going to be so lacking is a problem. And this may not be the best game you ever see. It could be one of the greatest European nights we ever see. And it's going to be overshadowed by everything in the build-up. Absolutely everything. And that is really concerning. The Champions League final is less worrying, but again, the flights have been jacked up, the flight prices by the airlines, not enough hotels. And again, UEFA are not doing enough to help cover some of the cost. Obviously, they were hoping for a Spanish team in said final, hence why they're in Spain. There are issues with the allocation of cities for the cup finals. Note Baku for Europa League, so backwater city in a country that has a dodgy human rights record for the second tier competition, and the Champions League gets one of the greatest stadiums in Spanish football. Yeah, there's a big issue there, and I do have concerns about how these stadiums are awarded for the finals, and I have concerns about next year's Euros as well. To the All Round Podcast, I've done a video on the Mkhitaryan squad withdrawal. It's up on my channel, so feel free to look out. It's one of my recent vids. That says all you need to know about my views on awarding Baku the Europa League final. I can look at some of your transfer vid after the live stream. I'm more than happy to support a fellow channel. But my video on Mkhitaryan is up, and my thoughts on it are this. The fact that he's already pulled out of one game against a Azerbaijani team, citing the same security concerns because of his Armenian heritage, speaks volumes to how flawed UEFA's decision is to award this final to Baku and to keep it there. And the fact that Armenia and Azerbaijan are technically in a semi-state of armed conflict and it could erupt into full-blown war at any time, yet they still award the final to Baku with all the geopolitical between the two nations. That's unacceptable. These are also two countries in that region that have issues with poverty, corruption, crime, violence, and they still get a nice Europa League final when there are people in Azerbaijan dying in poverty. So you can see where UEFA's eyes were at. It wasn't on the social aspect of this final. It was, there's an oil-rich, gas-rich nation that's got lots of oligarch money. Give us the money, because Gazprom, who's a major sponsor of European competitions, has oil and gas drilling rights in Azerbaijan. So they've chased the dirty oil money, which is a common theme in football the last couple of years. And yeah, it is really sad that Henrik Mkhitaryan doesn't feel safe enough to travel, but it's a damning indictment on UEFA that one of the players doesn't feel safe traveling to the final because of his nationality. It's like, I don't know, it's like awarding the final to Donetsk, which is in a war zone. It's basically like saying, okay, it's like awarding the Champions League final to Tel Aviv and a player of Muslim heritage not being safe in Israel. There are some. I understand that UEFA want to expand the game in Europe and increase the popularity and increase the participation and grow the game. But football is the world's global game. It doesn't need much more growing, if I can be brutally honest. The fact they've awarded the World Cup to Qatar, FIFA, just shows where the governing body's minds are at. They've chosen to go for dollars over human rights and basic human rights at that. And that says something about the organisation. That sums up the organisation. The fact that they've awarded a World Cup, though, to the USA, Canada, and Mexico, they're going back to countries that they've been to before, and Canada is a first-time host. So that's great. And guess what? The players won't die in 45-degree heat, which is brilliant. But I have concerns about some of the locations they've chosen as organisations to hold internationals and cup final competitions around the world. They have chosen some countries that have some pretty diabolical human rights records, and they've gone for money over the social side of it, where they could use the sport for good. They've chased the money and dirty money. And the Qatar World Cup completely sums up the state of global football. And this Europa League final sums up the state of UEFA. While I'm all for, growing the reach of sport, and it's not just football, it's all sport, they've gone for the money over the social and political aspects that need addressing. So, yeah, we'll place a final in a country that has a shocking human rights record and is in a semi-state of war with a neighbouring country of which one of the players of one of the teams is from, and it's very unsafe for him to travel to said country to play in a final. That's where I feel sorry for Mkhitaryan. I've done a video on the whole issue, the rip-off ticket prices, the fact that the allocations were so pitiful, the travel logistics issues, the hotel issues, 59 hours by car as an average. If there is no traffic and all the roads are safe, there's no traffic jams, there's no road works, there's no police checkpoints, there's no car bombings. Because to avoid the Ukrainian conflict, they have to go through the Kurdish conflict through the Caucasus, and that's kind of scary when the Kurds and the Turks are also in a semi-state of war. Plus, you've got the Syrian civil war over the border. So and it's the same with the IOC as well. The IOC, yeah, absolutely. The International Olympic Committee is a joke. A lot of them are career politicians who are administrators and have never actually participated as professional or amateur or semi-pro athletics at any point. Yeah, and there's backhanders. The Salt Lake City Winter Olympics, the awarding of that, laced with corruption claims. One of the best Winter Olympics I've ever seen, but loaded with corruption claims. The Tokyo Olympics, corruption allegations. So, yeah, no. Is it worth hosting it at Montreal? Check out the Montreal Olympics, Summer Olympics, and the issues that the Canadian government had in getting it ready on time. The Athens Olympics 2004, the Rio Olympics. I could list off a whole host of Olympic host cities that have had issues with the Olympic legacy. At least with the London Olympics, a lot of the venues are still being used in some capacity. And there has been some positive effects felt by the UK in certain aspects. The bigger issues is with funding for the various Olympic sports and sports funding. But at least the venues are still having a use. Whether it's all positive or not is irrelevant. Most of the venues that were used at the London 2012 Olympics are still being used. The issue with Rio and Athens and Montreal was a lot of these venues were left. Montreal nearly failed to get all the venues completed. Athens, half the venues are crumbling. Rio, half the venues are crumbling, and I think one of the Olympic swimming pools, the diving pool, is abandoned. Same with the World Cup. Some of the stadiums that were in the Brazil World Cup are now left to crumble. So, organising committees and governing bodies have a lot. How do I put it? A lot of issues that they need to face up. And I think instead of forcing the host nation or the host city to pay a lot of money, FIFA, the IOC, UEFA, World Rugby, they need to put some of their money into getting these venues and things ready as well, because otherwise the amount of money these organisations have is in the billions, trillions. And they should put some of the money towards getting these venues ready, making sure there is use post games or post tournament. And it's not always the case. And a lot of people say, why should the taxpayer have to pay for all these stadiums and arenas and venues that within 4 years have crumbled and have fallen apart and are abandoned? It's a waste of taxpayer money. And that's the big debate, is should the taxpayer pay for a sports stadium, or should the owner of the team or the organising committee? And there's that big debate. But yeah, the issues with the IOC, the Athens Games is the best example of 2004 for a failed Olympic legacy and a country that is basically bankrupt. And the Rio Olympics as well is another one where venues, are not being used, and the Football World Cup in 2014. The Montreal Games is the best one for mismanagement of preparing for a games when they were rewarded. So if you don't know the build up to the Montreal Games, there were issues in basically getting the arenas and the stadiums ready for the Olympics that year. They nearly didn't do it. It wasn't like they were just doing the finishing touches on the opening day. They were at one point not even sure if they were going to complete any of the venues. And not all the venues are still used today. Some of them are vacant and in poor state of repair. Karabakh is an Azerbaijani club that has played in Europe, in the Europa League. But the concern that I have about the Europa League final is, the atmosphere is going to be dead. If hardly any fans are travelling from the UK there, that sums up the complete and utter incompetence by UEFA. The ticket prices are inappropriate. The allocations were piss poor. And the fact that half the tickets allocated, which were a minuscule amount, have been returned, that says enough with the anger that fans have. And many fans are just going to stay back in the UK, watching fan zones, watch on the TV, watching pubs. They're not going to travel. And yeah, this is showing the frustrations fans have with ticket prices and locations for games and travel problems, not just in a European competition, but in the wider context. Fans have had enough. And if UEFA don't listen to fans' concerns, it's what's harming the sport. Is the fans are never thought of with any decision with a cup competition, transfer, player wages, ticket pricing. Fans are always seen as an inconvenience to the sport, and I think other sports are going the same way, which is really, really concerning. That ticket prices keep rising faster than they should, and the fans at the gate are the ones who pay the price. We were always told. I mean, and this is what shocks me with the amount of money from the TV deals that professional sport has. Ticket prices should be really affordable, but they're not, and that's where I have a massive concern with top flight sport. Is where is that money going, and why is the fact that fans are forced to pay like a month's wages? Oh God, no, ice hockey has, but not in this country to the same extent it has been in the NHL, because ticket prices are so variable, and they are making more money than they've ever made. Yet ticket prices are still exceptionally extortionate. When all but 3 teams could actually let us in for $10, $20 a ticket, they're actually charging 10 times that. But ice hockey, as a global sport, is nowhere near as badly tainted for ticket pricing and overinflation of merchandise as other sports, but it is starting that slippery slope of going the same way. Koulibaly staying at Napoli. To be fair, there's a lot of these players that are rumoured to be moving on. Until transfers actually take place and players sign with new clubs, I don't like the rumour mill. The fact that the manager has said he's not going is something that we've heard a lot with the transfer rumour mill, and then within a few weeks or months the players moved. So I'll wait to see if what players move where. There's like the Gareth Bale rumours, if he's going to stay at Real Madrid. There's this young Benfica prospect who's apparently been touted at 150 million, Wilfred Zaha, rumours about his future. So until I actually see actual transfers and players signing contracts, I don't put much faith in the rumour mill, because that's my thoughts on it. As I say, though, I'm not really following football as much as I was. It's got to a point now where the amount of money that's in the game, the player wages are unsustainable in the long term. And fans are getting more and more annoyed with how much they've got to pay. And I hark back to 30 years ago. English top flight football, for example, we'll say English top flight football when the average salary was about 50 to 80 grand a year. Players earn that in a week. So what players earn in a week was actually a yearly salary in the top flight 30, 40 years ago. That's how much football is out of touch and how far out of control it's gone. It really, the wages are overinflated. and the transfer market's overinflated, and ticket prices are actually overinflated. You know, the fact that a couple of seasons ago they could have all let us in for free. We'll talk about salary cap in a minute. I've discussed that before, and it is. Not really sport anymore. It's more business, but there's always been a business model to it. But I think now they've gone too much from the sporting aspect to more the money aspect, and I think it is slowly killing sport. The globalization of sport and the commercialization of sport is killing it and causing so many problems. Rugby union is a prime example of a sport that has gone from amateur to professional, and over the last 24 years, there's been professionalism. The game has grown, I will admit that. The quality at lower levels in the Tier 2 nations and Tier 2 leagues has massively improved. The skill set, the quality level, far greater than what it was in the amateur days. But at the same time, the sport is unsustainable with the wage demands, and many leagues and many clubs are actually operating at a loss. So there is an issue with rugby union. Rugby league has a money problem. Outside of Australia, there's a money issue with rugby league. So there are issues there, and some sports have brought in salary caps and spending caps to try and control costs, but to maximise profits, to make the sport more self-sufficient and not reliant on handouts from the governing body or government. So that's both codes of rugby are struggling in various parts of the world with finances, and we'll have to see what happens, especially with rugby union. Rugby union is going through a massive transition phase right now at the top levels of the game. And we'll have to see what happens after this World Cup, because there's a lot of issues concerning the governance of the game, where the money's at, international development, player wages, salary cap, a lot of things going on there. There should a salary cap in football. I think it's too late now for a salary cap at top level football. I really do. Very few leagues have a salary cap in professional football. I think the MLS has a salary cap system that is flexible. It's a soft cap system. I think the A-League in Australia has a similar salary cap type system. But apart from a couple of leagues, most of it there is no salary cap, or all there is financial fair play. So you have to basically be turning a profit. But I think what needed to be in place about 20, 30 years ago was a salary cap system, and they chose not to have one. And that's to football's detriment. Football is one of the few major global sports that globally very few leagues have a salary cap. Whereas you look at the NHL, like ice hockey, there are salary caps in place. There are overseas player rules in place to maximise the amount of homegrown talent in a lot of the minor leagues. There's all sorts of those kind of things. The NFL, salary cap, NBA, salary cap, Major League Rugby has a salary cap and an overseas player rule. It's a smaller league, it's growing. So the North American system has a salary cap system in place. Australia, salary cap system in place. There is a call for it, and in some leagues there wasn't a salary cap until very, very, very comparatively recently. And ironically, with a salary cap, the players are now getting paid more than they ever were before, across the board as an average. It's not just the top guys, it's everyone. So there are arguments to have it, but I think football is far too late to implement it with the salaries that players now have. I don't think the players want to give up their hard-earned cash. They would resist very, very strongly to any attempt to limit their salaries or cap their salaries at a limit. I think, while the idea is noble in its pursuit, I think football has gone 22, 25 years too late for a salary cap system to actually be effective. I think the wages are now so high that I don't think I honestly don't think that the salary cap will work in football. It's too late. The players will resist. There'll be issues around that. And as football has proved, financial fair play doesn't work. Football is actually a very archaic sport when it comes to the actual rules that it puts in place, like goal line tech and VAR. Other sports are miles ahead when it comes to video review and video refereeing. Football is so far behind. They're dragging their feet. They're like a Victorian organisation, really. They are so out of date and out of touch with modern technology. The NRL, I think it's still too early to say who's going to win the NRL. There's a lot of teams that had poor starts to the season that have suddenly hit form, and there are loads of teams that had a really great start to the season that have had a wobble in form. So it just shows how balanced the competition is. But I think the Rabbitohs are one of the favourites. The Storm can't be counted out. The Roosters, well, even though they have some injuries right now, cannot be discounted either. The Raiders have had a little bit of wobble, again injuries, but they have proven that on their day they can be unstoppable. Other teams that are struggling, Penrith are really in a mess, although they won their last game. The Newcastle Knights, they're a dark horse. I honestly say that the Knights are the dark horses to get to finals, but it's still too early. I think we'll have a better understanding of where teams are at post Origin, and I think that's where we've got to look at, because we don't know what's going to happen in Origin. There could be injuries, suspensions, all that kind of stuff. So I think post Origin we'll have a better idea in that second phase of the season where teams are actually at and where that gap in places is. Because some teams have overachieved and some teams have really underachieved and some teams are about right. And I think I would say it's still too early to say where we're at in that regard of where who's going to win. Oh yeah, where we are, and who's going to win, and who's going to miss out. I do apologise for yawning. I'm exceptionally tired, but I think it's too early in the season to really make an assessment of who's going to win and who's going to miss out, and what teams underachieve, overachieve, and what players have good years and bad years. I think there are some teams that are clearly in a rebuilding phase, and other teams that are set to win now. It's now or bust, and other teams that are about where they should be. I think the dark horse is the Knights, the Roosters, Rabbitohs, Storm, Raiders. They're the teams that I think could be competing towards the end of the season. The nicest player in football. I don't think there is a nice player in football anymore. There's no loyalty in football anymore. I wouldn't say there is a nicest player in football. To be honest, there's too many cynical, overpaid prima donnas in football. I think that's a better assessment. There are some genuinely. I would say Mata. He's doing all the right things, and his contemporaries are letting him down when it comes to his charity. I think Kante, yeah, he's a nice guy. Son, I'm not 100% sold on Son being a nicest guy, but he does cop a lot of abuse from his own fans for his heritage. But yeah, Mata, yeah, he does, his charity, his foundation is a brilliant idea. And the fact that so few players have signed up to it is an indictment on the greed of the game. Kante, I wouldn't say he's necessarily shy. I think he's just well spoken and has been brought up in the right way. I think he's a model professional for any professional sport. I think I think they're the kind of players that kids should look up to, but they're not the star players. So they're the role models I think kids should have in professional sport, and unfortunately, they're the ones who go under the radar. What do I think of the Broncos, the Panthers, and the Cowboys? The Cowboys, they're getting better. I think their issue is that they do miss Jonathan Thurston on that field. They do miss his guiding hand and his leadership qualities in the dressing room and on the pitch. I think the Broncos, they have to start. I mean, look, the Broncos have been the most consistent team apart from the Melbourne Storm in rugby league history. There has to come a point where that team stops winning and has to rebuild and retool for the next challenge. They're in a transition phase. The Panthers, I think it's the coach. It has to be the coach. There are so many players that are unsettled. There are players that are leaving or want to leave. There's a whole lot of issues with the Panthers that I think rests on what's happening in that dressing room and Ivan Cleary, the coach. There are issues there. The fact that his son, Nathan Cleary, plays for him, there's a bit of favouritism there as well. I don't think that sits well with some of the teammates. There is definitely an unsettled dressing room at the Panthers. We'll have to see if they can, continue after this win with a few more wins on the board, because they are struggling. The Cowboys, they're all over the place. The consistency is starting to come back. The Broncos, okay, they've arrested the slide. They've stopped the bleeding. They've got a couple of wins, but there are issues with all three clubs. And with the talent that all three clubs have, they should not be in the position they're in. And that's a fact. The talent that all three clubs have, they should not be at the wrong end of the table. But it does show how balanced the NRL is and how there's parity in the league. And that's a good thing. It means every team has a chance of winning. It would be nice to see the Melbourne Storm miss out on finals and someone else get in there. But we'll have to wait and see how the Cowboys, if they can get more consistency. The Broncos, can they continue to improve? And the Panthers, I think there's a lot of issues at the Panthers, and they could be wooden spoonists. But that's my personal opinion. Again, too early in the season to really tell. Post Origin, we'll have a better idea of where these teams are at, the situation the teams find themselves in. That's my personal opinion on that one. Norwich City, they could do a Wolves. They could do very, very well. I think they've got the right mentality. They've got the right direction. There's a purpose to the club. And they did very, very well this season. So it's going to be interesting to see. But 2 out of the 3 promoted sides were relegated this season. We'll have to see what happens. You know, there's a lot of transfers that can happen. Obviously, they're going to add to the squad, but they've got to spend the money in the right areas. Wolves are a blueprint of how to do it. So it's going to be an interesting one. I think it's far too early to predict who's going to finish where, because the predictions I made, I said Huddersfield would stay up, and I was wrong, very, very wrong about Huddersfield. Fulham, I always thought would go down. Cardiff, I thought would go down. I was just not sure about the other club that would go with them. So I got 2 out of the bottom 3 right in my predictions of where they would finish. Fulham were diabolical. They played Scotty Parker, interim manager, too late, and they made him permanent manager even later. So I think Fulham have got problems going into next season. Cardiff have always been a yo-yo club. They can never really establish themselves in the Premier League. Huddersfield are in deep trouble. That's my personal opinion on that situation. Next season, we don't know what's going to happen. I think Liverpool, Man City are streets ahead of the rest of the league. I think Tottenham will lose the Champions League final and go another season without silverware. And if Arsenal win the Europa League, that'll be like, well, you finished above in the league, but we still want silverware. Tottenham have to win such a trophy of any type very soon, or that's it for this group of players. That's my personal opinion. This group of players have to win soon. They should have won last season with the FA Cup, which they lost to Man United in the semi-final. They should have won that. But that's my opinion on Tottenham and the Premier League. But I don't really follow the Premier League. Really, I've gone off football. Like, I prefer international football and over club football. But I know a lot of people who think the other way. The French Open. I don't watch tennis as much as I used to. I've got to a point now with some sports where I've lost a love for them, and there are issues with tennis. The French Open, I think it could be a very open tournament. I think Rafael Nadal is starting to show he's near the end of his career. There are some cracks in his armour. There are some very good clay court players that can challenge him. There's some great all-rounders that can challenge him, but he's still the favourite. But he is showing, a few cracks in that armour that he's got. And Fognini beating him earlier this season, I think that's a big statement from Fognini. I think he's one of the few guys who could possibly win the French Open and break the stranglehold of the Big Four. Because I think the Big Four at the top end of the world rankings, there's a stranglehold there, and only 2 other players have won Grand Slams that are still active in the top 20. So, yeah, I think Fognini beating Nadal on clay earlier this season, that gives hope to every other player on the tour. Obviously, it's clay, so if it rains, it gets horrible out there as a surface to play on. But it's going to be interesting. The weather will have a big part to play as well. The weather will have a massive part to play. Last year, obviously, that summer was so hot, brutally hot, and players were struggling both at the French and Wimbledon, both the French Open and Wimbledon. So it's going to be interesting to see how the players adapt to the weather as well as the court conditions. And is Rafael Nadal starting to show signs that this is beginning of the final chapter of his career? It could be very, very open. But I'm not really a tennis fan. Because apart from the Grand Slams, or 2 of the big Grand Slams, the French and Open and Wimbledon being on free-to-air TV, the others being on, I think the Australian is on Sky Sports, and the Amazon have the US Open, because only 2 out of the 4 are on accessible media platforms for all in this country, in the UK. I don't know what it's like over in Australia or around the world, but in this country, only 2 out of the 4 Grand Slams are available for everyone to watch free without subscription. That's an issue that tennis has to get over, is making it more accessible for all. But tennis is one of those sports that is seen as elitist, that you need to have money to get involved in, and that is sort of the case. Manchester United, how long until they get back to the top? There's a lot of issues with Man United behind the scenes. It's not Solskjaer's fault. It's not any of the managers' fault that have followed Ferguson. It's actually what's happening in the boardroom, which is killing Man United. But there was a period of time between the late 60s and the early 90s, they didn't win the league. So between 69 and 92, they did not win the league once. And they were actually at one point as low as the second division, so what is now the Championship. So they weren't a great side. They won a lot of FA Cups in that period, but apart from that, they weren't a very good side at all. They were mediocre in the 70s and 80s, very mediocre side. And it took 20 odd years to get back to the top with the Ferguson era and the Premier League era. It could take that long. It could honestly take a generation to fix. It could take a couple of seasons. Solskjaer has said there's got to be a clear out. There's got to be new faces brought in, and youth has to be promoted. But a lot of the issues lie with Ed Woodward behind the scenes and the ownership. There's a lot of issues behind the scenes with the day-to-day running of the club. They're still making money somehow, but they're not making the money. Doesn't give you success on the pitch. There's issues with some of their transfer market dealings, their scouting, and the squad they've got is just not good enough. And it could take a very, very long time. But I say to any fan of Man United, firstly, I'm not a Man United fan. I never have been. But Ferguson, it took a long time for Alex Ferguson to really settle into the job and actually be successful. They nearly fired him several times in his first 2 seasons in charge. So he wasn't guaranteed to stay there for as long as he did. The early seasons with Sir Alex Ferguson weren't an exact science. He nearly lost his job on multiple occasions in the first 3-4 years he was there. And as soon as he brought the first league title, the rest is history, so to speak. But it took a long time for even Ferguson to have a positive impact on the club where they were the country's best. It took a long time. And before Ferguson came along, you had Ron Atkinson, and he had a decent spell with them, won them a few trophies, a few FA Cups, but for the most part, they were an average, mediocre side for a long time. And that's the concern that I think Man United fans have. But they've got so used to winning that they actually forget, a lot of the older fans forget the bad times of lack of success. A lot of the Man United fans today only know nothing but success. And you've got to go through peaks and lows, highs and lows. And that's the issue with Man United, is they've been so successful for so long, they forgot what it's like not to win a trophy every season. And yeah, they've obviously got the Europa League title in there under Mourinho, and Van Gaal got the FA Cup, but that's it. No league title since Ferguson retired. So there are issues there. If they become a cup team like Liverpool and still bring trophies in, I think that's better than nothing. But I honestly think there's going to be a long, hard rebuilding process ahead, and a lot of it has to happen in the boardroom, because what's happening off the pitch is actually having more of an impact of what happens on the field than the players themselves. There's a lot of politics at play with Man United behind the scenes that actually is very, very damaging going forward for the club. But it's going to be tougher for them to get back to the top than what it was in the early 90s. I'm just putting it out there. It's going to be a lot harder for them to compete for the title now than 25 years ago. A lot of the football's changed. But the fact still remains they've won half the Premier League titles, or half the Premier League's ever contested. So they're still the most successful side in Premier League history. But time will tell. There's rumours linking Paul Pogba to a move back to Juventus. Do Juventus really want a player who doesn't defend? The Italian style is all 11 players pull their weight. Pogba is an enigma. He's good one day, shocking the next. How he won a World Cup, I'll never know. And I don't know about Paul Pogba. I'm not sold on Pogba. My uncle, he's Italian, he's a Juventus fan, and he says to me this: Pogba, exceptionally talented, bloody lazy. And Pogba he's exceptionally talented, he's also exceptionally lazy. There's a lot of players who've come before him who are very similar. I remember Dimitar Berbatov never ran. He had no pace. He was the laziest centre forward you would ever see, but also one of the most skillful who could score amazing goals. So Pogba is, I don't know if he's good or bad, but I think Pogba, his ego is damaging that dressing room and is unsettling a lot of players. But so is Alexis Sanchez's presence. You got to look at the players that were awarded new contracts at the end of this season. Not players you want to build around. There's rumours linking Pogba to a move away. I think Man United will make a loss on his move away. On his day, Pogba can be brilliant, but then the next game, he's absolutely hopeless. So I don't know about Paul Pogba. I really am not sold on Pogba as a world-class player, day in, day out. He has too many off days, which do affect how the rest of the team play, because he's such a creative player and such a focal player for their attack that when he's having an off day, they don't play as well. And losing Ander Herrera, like a box-to-box midfielder, I think is more damaging for the club than losing Paul Pogba, because there's not enough energy in that midfield, and to lose one of your energy midfielders, that's a big problem. Juan Mata cannot drive that midfield by himself day in, day out. He will need assistance from other midfielders, and there's not enough coming because Pogba is too inconsistent, and that's an issue that Man United are going to have. Is what to do with Pogba. Does he stay? Does he go? What position do they play him in? How do they fit him into the system? Solskjaer has made it very, very clear that players will be cleared out this summer and a rebuild will be happening this summer. And I think they have to give Solskjaer time. And fans and people are mocking Solskjaer online. Well, a lot of these Man United fans are not old enough to remember the early days of Ferguson's struggles at Man United back in the late 80s. And they're very fickle. And the Man United fan base is not a popular fan base with fans of the sport generally. Neither is Man City. Neither of the two big Manchester clubs are very popular with the sport as a whole. With just fans in general, they come across very, very poorly. But it's hard to assess a rebuild of any sporting side. You could look at the NHL and go the rebuild where you tear it down and build it back up. That's a salary cap system, so there are constraints on the players you can bring in. Football doesn't have that system, so if Man United want to spend the money, they can spend the money. I don't know. I've watched a few games in La Liga this season, and to be fair, I'm not actually overly impressed with the quality level of the teams on display. I'm really not actually that impressed with the quality. I think Barcelona, I think their time has been and gone. I think everyone going, "Oh, Messi's the GOAT." He's never won an international tournament in his life at senior level. He's got no international winners' medals. So that says all you need to know about his attitude towards his country, Argentina. I think Barcelona, yeah, they have peaked. Several of their spine, their key leaders like Rakitic, Suarez, Messi, are all in their 30s. So they're actually past their peak years. And yeah, I think I wasn't overly impressed with the quality on display with the La Liga games I watched. The technical ability is there. There is technical ability throughout the La Liga system, from Barcelona all the way down to the lower levels of Spanish football. The technical ability and the skill level is there, but the players can't tackle to save their lives. Defense is optional. In Spanish football, defense is, and there's so many lopsided games where there's blowouts. It's almost embarrassing to watch sometimes. But Barcelona, their fans have got so used to, and Real Madrid, their fans are so used to winning. They don't tolerate a season without a trophy, and they're very toxic fan bases. And I have little time for a toxic fan base. A lot of the Spanish fan bases are exceptionally toxic, and the merry-go-round of managers in Spanish football is on a daily basis. It makes English football look stable and controlled. I don't know who's going to win La Liga next season. I do think Barcelona have passed their best as the current group of players they've got, and their leadership core is aging. 1 or 2 good seasons left in them. And some of the defeats Barcelona have had in the Copa del Rey and the Champions League sum up some severe issues within the Barcelona club and Spanish football as a whole. There's issues with politics at the top level. I think Spanish football's had its golden decade for now, and its period of success. And I think it's going to revert back to a more open European kind of competition. The British clubs dominating this season. I think Spanish football will end up like Italian and French football at some point, where it's going to go through a phase of lesser success at club level in Europe. Because I think Italy had its golden period in the 80s and 90s. Spain's had the 2000s, 2010s. I would say that the 2010s, the last 9-10 years has been Spain dominated, the last decade or so. And I would say French football has never really dominated the European scene, really. German football has been there and thereabouts. I think the 70s was the Germans' decade alongside Liverpool. Yeah, I think the era of Spanish dominance in European Cup competition is over. And I do think that if Messi was to play in the Premier League, I think his goal tallies are halved. I really do. But it is what it is. I think what we're seeing is a change in club football, but I think there's so many issues with professional football that we could argue them all day. We discussed them yesterday at a very long length. I mean, we went into real depth about a lot of the issues that professional football faces. But we do this every live stream. Football dominates, and I prefer if football didn't dominate the live streams as much as they do. But of course, it's the most global sport. The GOAT soccer. Oh, it's Pele. For me, it's always Pele. There is no argument in that. But modern fans who are below the age of 30 really don't. They it's the debate between Ronaldo and Messi. Ronaldo has won one international trophy. Messi has won none. So yeah, that sums it up really. They may be great at club level, international level. They're actually pretty mediocre, and I'm not going to lie on that one. They're overrated when it comes to international level because it's a team game, and they're two massive egos that are individuals. When it comes to team sports, it's their way or the highway, really. And yeah, they actually are pretty toxic individuals when it comes to themselves being the big ego of the team. It's our way or no way. And I think football will be better off when they both retire. No, Maradona, he's too flawed a character to be the greatest. I think Pele actually is one of the few nice characters actually in the game of all time. I think the way Pele has conducted himself throughout his life and his career is, I wouldn't say he's been exemplary. He's had a fair few issues off the field, but as a player, he wasn't drugged to his eyeballs in a World Cup. He played with grace. And in '66, he was kicked off out of the World Cup. He was fouled out of the World Cup. And that's when diving wasn't a thing, and that's when two-footed challenges at knee height were still acceptable as just a free kick only. Yeah, the Portuguese kicked Pele out of the World Cup in '66. They shut him down by physically kicking the crap out of him. Maradona, the negatives about Maradona, his cheating, his drug problems. He even made a sex tape. Yes, Maradona did that. Maradona is too much of a cynical player to be the greatest of all time for me. Skill wise, brilliant player. Like Maradona as a player when he wasn't a cynical cheating bastard, absolutely brilliant player. Mesmerizing on the eye with what he could do. However, exceptionally flawed. And some of the antics he bear in mind when he was playing for Barcelona in the Copa del Rey final against Bilbao in the 80s, he did incite a riot. He incited a riot between Bilbao and Barcelona that was on ethnic lines. So he's not all he's cracked up to be. Maradona, there's too much negativity with Maradona for him to really be the greatest of all time. But then you could say Garrincha was possibly the greatest of all time, and he was pre-Pele. You could say Socrates, a player who never won the World Cup. You could go for Cruyff. You could go for a whole variety of players, many of whom didn't win the World Cup, but actually were pretty nice guys, and so they're the greatest of all time. It's not just about goal scoring. Everyone seems to like think, oh, it's all about goal scoring, but it's a team game. And I think some of the players that I think are possibly the greatest technically or greatest team players don't get a look in because it's all about the goal scoring. It's all about putting the ball in the net. Well, actually, it's all about the team. And there are some great players that weren't prolific goal scorers, but actually proper creative players who did things to make the space for the goal scorer. Oh God, no! I would have Ronaldinho over Messi any day. Ronaldinho always played the game with a smile on his face, even when like it wasn't going as well. I would even put Kaká in there, Maldini, as a leader. I think there's a whole host of players you could put in there. Either Maldini, father or son, would be for me a greater player of all time than Messi because they were team players who played. I could put Nesta in there as a defender. I could look at Michel Platini soured his reputation by his corruption, but Platini, brilliant player. Not getting mentioned as the greatest of all time because he was a midfielder, not a prolific goal scorer. You could put in a whole variety of players who were just all-round technical ability, creative, defensive. Goalkeepers in there. You could put Taffarel in there for a goalkeeper. Gordon Banks, who's now passed away, was he the greatest goalkeeper of all time? Lev Yashin. There's a whole host of players who aren't the I've scored 1,000 goals. Look at me, I'm an ego. There were a lot of players who were the guys really. You could put in Neeskens of Holland after Cruyff, Jari Hahn, who could whack in a ball from 40 yards. You could put in half of the Brazil side from 1970, who I think had far greater technical ability than half the players today. Ronaldinho, yeah, I would have Ronaldinho, absolutely. Original Ronaldo, pity about the injuries destroying his career. You could put Kaká. I would honestly have Kaká above Messi because his technical ability, his teamwork ethic. He was a team guy. Beckenbauer, again, his reputation's been soured by corruption claims in recent years, but as a player and as a manager of the German national side, brilliant. He's the Kaiser. Der Kaiser. Good goal scoring record for a sweeper as well, because yeah, he was a sweeper, defensive midfielder. Very good goal scoring record for a defensive player. Hard man. Bearing in mind, he played in the World Cup semi-final with a dislocated collarbone for like an hour against Italy in 1970. Yeah, that was when men were men and they actually played on with broken bones. Now they just roll around and pretend they've been shot. This is why I cannot have Ronaldo and Messi is my greatest of all time, because they simulate so much. They're cynical. I would much rather have, Mario Kempes in my starting 11 out of all time over Messi. Because guess what? He won a World Cup wearing the number 10 for Argentina. Messi hasn't. Just pick it out there. I would rather have, I would rather have Kempes over Messi. I would have Kempes over Maradona because, Kempes kept Maradona out the 1978 side. Luque from that Argentinian side could whack a pile driver in from 30 yards and then create a goal for his teammate. But that's me having a lot of knowledge about football pre-Premier League era and pre-Champions League era. I know a lot about football in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and there were some great players back then who don't get a reckoning with the greatest of all time because they didn't score like 500 goals in like 500 games. I would say the quality level of actual top-level football, the skill level, is lesser now than what it was 30 years ago. You just have to look at footage of the Brazil 1970 side or the Argentinian side from 78, the Dutch side that never won a World Cup in 74 and 78, and just go, hang on a second, that these guys were doing that with balls that were twice the weight, with boots that were twice the weight, and on pitches that were mud baths half the time. You just have to look at the German World Cup the West German World Cup in 1974, and the German-Sweden game, where Germany win 4-2. And it is just a thunderstorm. The Holland-Argentina game, where it is a washout and it's a biblical rain and hail and 4 thunderstorms in the match. The Germany-Poland semi-final, where the pitch is a mud bath. players today play on almost perfect surfaces. When there's a little divot, they complain that the surface is unplayable. No, go back to the 70s and 80s and early 90s. Pitches were unplayable by today's standards. Were played on. The players didn't complain. They, rolled their socks up or down or rolled their sleeves up and got on with it. Some of the Wembley Cup finals, they're, mud bath. Same with rugby union, rugby league. Some of the pitches they played on, let alone 15 years ago, would be unthinkable now. And players now, I think, are too mollycoddled. They're too soft. You have to go back to the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and you will see mud baths of pitches at international World Cup level that are just not suitable to play on by today's standards. The modern era started in the late 60s. Some of the pitches they played on would not pass a safety inspection today. Yet the players didn't complain, got on with it, and actually played some pretty good football in some pretty testing conditions, and some of the greatest goals were scored on mud baths. I think today the players get it easier when it comes to pitches. They complain if there's just too much watering on the pitch or the pitch is too dry. They whinge and whine. Go back 20 years, those pitches would cut up, muddy, and the players wouldn't complain too much. They would get on and play. But that's my personal opinion on football. Do I think the English Premier League is overrated? To a point. I think there's not enough homegrown talent playing in the domestic league. I think there's too many overseas players and coaches, and I think that's actually harming the game and has damaged the game pretty. It is what it is. I do think the pitches they've made them so much better than what they were. Absolutely, the quality of pitches is brilliant. But I don't mind the occasional mud bath and seeing players get a bit dirty. It means they've done a bit of work. But as the pitches have got better, the diving's got more frequent. I do miss a bit of a muddy pitch occasionally. It's a bit of a leveler when you've got that skillful team playing against that physical team. You add some conditions in there. It's a proper test. It's a test of not only your skill but your endurance. And now they want to see the sexy passing, sexy football. They've taken tackling out of the game to a point where every time a player goes in for a tackle, it's a foul in some competitions, which is a bit boring. That there's not enough tackling in the game now. They've taken that out of it. The physical element of the game has been reduced significantly. And the cheating by players when they dive and they roll around, they simulate injury and feign injury is damaging the reputation of the game. This is why the sport is not bigger in the US and Canada, because they expect players, because the sports that they like American football, ice hockey, Canadian football, they've really brought into rugby because it's a physical game. Players actually play hurt. They do not tolerate the simulation that we see in football. There's actually a 2-minute minor penalty for simulating an ice hockey. You actually get, you get penalised for feigning injury or diving. You get penalised. So it rarely happens in ice hockey that a player takes a cheap dive. Joe Jordan, was a tough nut. Mick McCarthy, defender's defender. Not the most skillful player, but my God, he could put a tackle in. Yeah. Oh God, yeah. No, the modern pitches. I've read a lot about the hybrid pitches and the plastic or AstroTurf type pitches that have got toxins in that are actually bad for the environment, let alone the players' health. It's the environmental damage. I like a good old fashioned grass turf pitch. If it gets worn out by the end of the season, it gets worn out by the end of the season. But I'd rather have a grass pitch than a solid AstroTurf one because the injuries change. They're more contact injuries and concussions are higher on the plastic pitches than the grass. There's less give in them. They're pretty solid. And they actually rip your skin to pieces, which is not great when you've got festering grazes that can get infected. There is a scandal about the modern pitches. While maintenance is a hell of a lot easier, the environmental impact when you're using rubber tires as a base is there. There is a environmental impact when it comes to what these pitches are made out of, and I much prefer the good old grass and the white chalk, the white paint. I prefer that far more than a plastic pitch. I really do. I preferred playing on them. I preferred training on them. I learnt my rugby skills playing on a grass pitch. I learnt my goalkeeping skills in football playing on a grass pitch. The bounce of a ball is different on an AstroTurf or a plastic pitch, or 3G or 4G. It's completely different. The spin on the ball changes. More so in football than you think. It does affect how the ball behaves. And as a goalkeeper, that is key. How the ball behaves and runs is different on a plastic 3G, 4G pitch than turf pitch. It has a completely different bounce, different spin, different swerve. The heat you get from the sun, if it's a hot day and you're playing on AstroTurf, it's actually hotter at ground level than on grass. You can really feel the heat hit you at ground level. So they're horrible to play in summer. They are horrible to play on. Rugby, again, there's a lot of contact injuries with them. And scrum, I've actually noticed scrums struggle more on the Astro than on turf. There's more slipping in scrums. So I'm not a big fan of them. I'm not. But it is what it is. A lot of teams are using them. A lot of stadiums use them to save maintenance costs in the medium to long term. I get that, but I can understand in a league where you need an all-weather pitch because of weather, like Scotland, for example, or Norway. I completely understand countries like that where they do have extreme weather conditions, where the pitch, if it was turf, would not be suitable. I completely understand that, but on the same time, I'm just not sold on them. I've played on them, I've trained on them, and I don't like them. I learnt most of my skills as a rugby player at school and as a goalkeeper in football on grass. I've played on Astro, having a kickabout, and yeah, I can definitely tell you the way the ball reacts when it bounces, it's different. The spin you can put the ball's different. It's like almost like an unnatural movement of the ball. It really doesn't. It moves a lot differently when you strike it. Off the ground. The swerve is different. The spin you can put on it is different. It is a different beast on turf. It's very hard to read. Even as an outfield player, it's hard to read when the ball bounces. It kicks on differently. It just spins away from you. It actually picks up speed and goes away from you very, very quickly. Whereas on a grass pitch, it will spin and slow and slow the rotation. On a turf, it will bounce lower and zip away. And a lot of players are not big fans of playing on the artificial surface. But that's my personal opinion. There are those that don't mind, and there are those that don't like it. You've got the purist traditionalist, and those who've actually, as fans, and those who've actually used it as five-a-side, playing on grass. It's a completely different beast. I don't enjoy it. I don't feel as confident on the AstroTurf in goal. If I'm having a kickabout with my mates that I used to do, I used to have a weekly kickabout with my mates, and I never felt as confident on a turf, AstroTurf, as I did on grass. I was more confident on grass. I was more competent on grass. I felt more confident in my ability to stop the shot, handle the bouncing ball. Whereas on Astro, it's a different kettle of fish. It's something that I've noticed. When I'm watching sport, when I'm watching football, when I'm watching rugby union, when I'm watching rugby league, that AstroTurf, when the ball bounces, it does weird things. It's a different skill set you need, and because so few teams use the Astro, it throws players all over the place. It does some weird stuff, but that's my personal opinion on the turf side of things. My top 5 football teams today, I don't really have any. I've always been a Blackburn fan. I always will be. You're not going to change my mind on that. Would I like to see some new names on some trophies around European leagues and in Champions League and Europa League? Absolutely. My top 5 players, that's subjective, and a lot of people will disagree with my list. But I honestly think my top 5 players of all time would not be the same as other people's. And you have to look at like players that I mentioned, like Pele, like Socrates, Cruyff, Neeskens. Beckenbauer is one of the top players. But then you've got to look at underrated players as well. Kempes and Luque, 78 winning side would get into my top 10. over more modern players. So I would say my top 5 teams only have the one team that I follow. I have a soft spot for certain teams that I would like to see do well, but I'm always a Blackburn fan and I always will be. But the way I feel about sport now, and the toxicity of fan bases is different. I've learned to be a bit more neutral when it comes to things and less bias. If you were to ask me 2 years ago when I started the channel my thoughts on a lot of teams, I would have given it less than politely about certain teams and fan bases. And there are some fan bases whose minority, there's a minority of fans who make it a toxic fan base. Absolutely. I've been very critical about a lot of teams. Yes, the Peru game in '78, and they had to change the rules on having teams play at the same time after the '82 World Cup, because the Germany Austria game at the World Cup in '82 in the group stage is a pretty dodgy match as well. There's been allegations about that Peru game in '78. There's allegations about the West Germany Austria game in '82 that screwed the Algerians. There's a lot of allegations about a lot of World Cup games at key moments in tournaments for a long time. The Peru game in '78, there's a whole conspiracy theory about it, but actually, it's done now. I wouldn't say Liverpool is a toxic team, but I would say there are a huge proportion of the fan base that are toxic. Absolutely, I've been to Anfield, I've seen it. There is a very toxic fan minority there that actually are very vocal and bring a whole bring the whole club down. The keeper of Peru was born in Argentina. There is that link. There's also a link between the military dictatorships of Peru and Argentina at the time, but there is no way that kind of collusion could have done what was needed. But there was intimidation tactics used by the Argentinian government to intimidate the Peruvian players and make them fearful of how they would be. But I've got the game on tape, and it is really, you can tell the Peruvian players have been intimidated. Would I say that actual bribes were paid to fix the game? I don't know, but I think FIFA were pretty happy with Argentina getting through somehow because they were the hosts. I think the FIFA organisers, who were also corrupt as hell, and Sepp Blatter was involved with FIFA even back then. There was a lot of corruption at FIFA at the time. I know Cruyff wouldn't go for a variety of reasons. He later revealed that the reason why he didn't go was not because of the military dictatorship in Argentina, but the attempted kidnap attempt on his family in Barcelona was the reason why he wouldn't go. But that came out after he died in full detail. There was rumours that he wouldn't go because of political things, and there's rumours because of the kidnap attempt. After he died, it's fully come out about the attempt to kidnap his family in Barcelona. I don't know who was behind it, but there was an attempt on his family. But there's a lot of rumours about Cruyff not going and various things. But at the end of the day, Cruyff liked ruffling feathers. He pissed off the Dutch FA a hell of a lot. He pissed off Dutch football as the league a hell of a lot, and he didn't make a lot of friends as a player or as a manager. He was one of those guys who would say it how it was, and off the field, very colourful character. On the field, genius, but at the same time, he was a flawed genius. I would say to Hornet, I'm being okay. I've got a new job, quite busy with my new job, and keeping the channel going as well with all the struggles that YouTube keep putting in the way, because they keep making it so easy for creators to get exposure. So easy. I do watch the AFL occasionally, but I dip in and out. I'm not a hardcore follower of the AFL. I just dip in and out. I love watching it, but I don't have a team in the race, if you know what I mean. I couldn't tell you who's going to win the AFL, but I just dip in and out. I think what the AFL does very, very well is they've expanded across Australia very well. The regional lower leagues in each state and territory supply some great players. I think the only two places that not actually got an AFL team permanently is the Northern Territory and Tasmania. Canberra is obviously too small a market for the AFL because it's only got Canberra in it. Yeah, but they could go to Tassie. They could go to Northern Territory. I think the AFL I've won the battle over the NFL over the NRL at this point with the market share. But the NRL itself is, again, the scandal in the off season has really damaged the NRL's image, both in Australia and New Zealand and abroad. But we'll we can discuss that in a bit. There's a big issue that I want to discuss about the NRL. Scotland not playing Souness. Yeah, no, that was a bizarre decision. If you want to look at the history of that World Cup, not playing Souness in the first 2 games is a bizarre decision that Scottish fans who were old enough to remember are still puzzled about today. But that is up for debate. The Magic Weekend, well, it's at Anfield, and after watching the New Zealand tour, the England New Zealand Test series, and they chose Anfield as one of the venues, and the atmosphere being absolutely flat as hell. There's a reason why rugby league is struggling to expand in this country. They're too M62 focused, and they choose the wrong stadiums for locations for big games. And they don't. For some reason, they have a perverse avoidance of wanting to expand in the south of England, where the money's at, because the game is crying out for investment. And I'm not surprised that 54,000 tickets have been sold, bearing in mind that so many companies in the north of England are struggling right now. And the north of England is less economically well off than the south of England. Is it any surprise that the ticket numbers sold are really poor? Has the Magic Weekend lost its magic? That's another question. Have fans got bored of this gimmick? Because the NRL, a lot of the NRL fans weren't happy with the NRL Magic Weekend, saying, "Oh, we're copying Super League's gimmick. It's not an original idea." And I think league fans around the world are getting a bit bored of these gimmicks. They just want to see good quality footy. They just want to see a good quality game. And yeah, no, I think I do think they need to look at actually expanding the game into new markets, bringing in fresh money and fresh investment, because we're not getting the best Australian and Kiwi players coming over here to play anymore, and our best players are going over to the NRL. And there's no surprise that half the England side is now based in Australia. There's no surprise that the head coach of Great Britain and England is Wayne Bennett. The best coaches and the best players are Australian. I've always said the NRL is superior to Super League in the last 10, 15 years, and it will continue to be so. Because in the NRL, that's where the money is. That's where the money's at. Whereas Super League, the money's drying up. And you got to look at Widnes struggling financially. You got to look at the Bradford Bulls collapse. And you got to look at the £1 million game and go, really, was that a good idea? That was a gimmick, and it's actually damaged the sport. And you got to look at the chronic chaos that is, how do I put it, the grassroots levels outside of the M62 corridor. There isn't one, and it seems like they want the London Broncos to fail, which I find bizarre, because so many players have come through their youth system that they've stolen from Union and offered a chance to play professional rugby, and get paid. The Super League, no, it's behind a paywall. The only free-to-air comp we get is the Challenge Cup, and then we don't even get all the games of the Challenge Cup live on TV. How much longer am I live? As long as you guys keep asking questions, and as long as I feel like I want to do it. I could be as live as long as we want. I think the longest live stream we've done is 4 hours, so we might want to break that record. And feel free to get any of your subscribers to follow. Get involved, give us subscribe, have a view, because I'm more than happy to keep growing the channel. If I'm live for 10 hours, I'll be live for 10 hours. It's as long as you guys are happy to keep asking questions and watching, I will keep going. I'm wide awake. I've got nothing to do today. There's Soddle on TV. It's a Sunday. It's my bank holiday weekend. I've got a day off tomorrow. I can go as long as you guys want me to. The clubs, there are issues with clubs throughout the league structure having problems. And the Challenge Cup final last year summed up the issues that rugby league has with its image. A half-filled Wembley Stadium was embarrassing. The game was brilliant to watch as a spectacle. It was a really entertaining game to watch. But as an atmosphere, they screwed the Catalan Dragons over. And then what they did in the off-season with trying to force Toronto and Toulouse to pay an entrance fee alongside Catalan, but not the English clubs, really damaged the image of rugby league and made it seem really out of touch with the modern world by punishing non-English clubs to take part in the Challenge Cup, which is a great competition. I think they were pissed off that Catalan, actually a French club, won the Challenge Cup. I think that was a bit of a slight against the non-English teams, and I think this is the issue rugby league's got to face up to. I think it's badly managed. I think the people running the game are out of touch completely, possibly racist because they're all white middle class. There's not enough people from minority backgrounds, A, playing the sport, B, watching the sport, and C, running the sport. So there's a race issue there. There's an old boys club issue, and the sport is going to kill itself by not expanding to new locations and embracing new areas. And the fact that they screwed over Toulouse, Toronto, and tried to screw over Catalan was a cheap move, really cheap. There's a reason why they're losing money. It's not because of those clubs. Those clubs are actually doing rather well, and they don't like it because they're not English. The fact that the Magic Weekend has got the lowest attendances in over a decade says something about where fans feel the game is at, and some of those hardcore Northern fans don't want the game to expand. They really, you know, they're sort of xenophobic about expanding. It seems to want to bite the hand that feeds it. I mean, the game needs money. The rugby league, the RFL, are losing money. Investment would come from the south of England and across the continent of Europe and North America, and they seem very very resistant to allowing non-English teams to join. It's weird. That's my view. I think the RFL needs a complete shake-up and needs their heads checked. The Man City treble. The treble has only been done by Celtic. Celtic are the only team to do it more than once. But I think Liverpool will eventually overtake them. I think they've closed the gap. City have declined a little bit. They're not as good as they were last year. I think, but the cup runs they had the easier runs to the finals that I've ever seen. It's the fixing. The fact that the financial fair play argument's not going away, and Guardiola's response is tacky. That there are issues with the Premier League. I think we need a new name on that trophy. Leicester was a breath of fresh air, and the EPL doesn't want that to happen again. They want to make sure the little guy never wins, and that's the problem. That's where sport's got an issue now with some of these leagues. It's for the good of the sport. It's healthy when lots of teams win. It shows the health of a league. It shows the competitiveness of a league. When you have one team dominating, it gets a bit. But it's not good. That's why the Celtic winning the SPL again actually harms Scottish football more than it helps it. But Huddersfield getting 96 million for losing and Celtic getting 2 million for winning shows how out of touch and wrong it is. They're getting paid to lose. That's not right. You should not be rewarded for being crap. Plain and simple, they're being rewarded for being shit. That's where I have a problem. It's like everyone's a winner here. Well, no, they finished last. They got relegated, deservedly so. They were shocking all season. Why should we give them more money for losing? It's rewarding failure. And this is where football has this unhealthy balance. All the money's at the top and then it drops off. Failure is being rewarded. Players think they're going to get a payout because their wages are far too high. The transfer market is wrong. There's a lot of issues. And the fact that a title winning... Oh yeah, I still think they should get like some prize money, but 96 million for finishing last is not right at all, not in the slightest. Huddersfield got over 300 in real terms. Huddersfield got over 300 million for getting to the Premier League. The fact that they didn't spend any of that in the transfer market and they shut their academy down, you got to ask where's the money gone. Because they kept themselves on a very small budget. But no, there are issues within football. I think the fact that the championship playoff final is worth more money than the club that wins the Champions League is bananas. Absolutely bananas. I wouldn't say they're sorted for years because we've seen with so many clubs that have come up, lasted not very long, and gone back down. That there is issues there. Sunderland being a prime example. A few others. Bradford City, they are in a mess. Bolton, you have to ask what's going on at Bolton because they're facing liquidation. We're not even sure if Coventry are going to have a ground to play at next season. Notts County have gone out the Football League and could go bust. Yeah, Tell the fans that. Where's the money gone? Portsmouth, where did that money go? Milan Mandaric is a crook. Harry Redknapp naming a dodgy bank account after his favourite dog. Come on, people. Let's not be naive here. Oh God, they're going to play in Birmingham. Oh, that's going to go down well. Really, the fan. Oh yeah, that's great. That's great. Share with one of your biggest rivals. Oh my. It's like they want them. It's like they want there to be a riot. It's like they want to. Do Birmingham? I'm assuming Birmingham, another club with some really dodgy finances. Oh my God, there are some big issues. The Football League is a joke. The EFL, the FA, the Premier League, their governance is a joke. And I don't like going on about it and discussing it, but it saddens me how the sport in this country and around the world is shockingly governed, and the corruption that is there. Let's stop being naive about this. I think fans need to protest with their feet and their wallets, and eventually they might start taking notice of what's going on, because this is beyond a joke now. They don't. They never will. How did Redknapp get away with it? Because a court found him not guilty. That's how Redknapp got away with it. And it's bizarre how every club Milan Mandaric has had a hand in has nearly gone bust. And there's been allegations against him at every club he's had an involvement with. I mean, the amount of money that Portsmouth lost in missing funds is exactly the same amount of money they got for winning the FA Cup and the TV rights agreement with what is UEFA for what is now the Europa League, which they qualified for. That is exactly the same amount of money that is missing. Actually, no, Harry Redknapp won the FA Cup with Portsmouth. He did win the FA Cup with Portsmouth. So, I think I'm a celeb FA Cup. I would go for silverware over a pointless, stupid reality TV program, which is a load of crap. Just saying. But that's ITV. ITV is a really dumb network. I mean, they've really dumbed down their television to the point where I want to gouge my eyes out and my ears and drink bleach. It's more preferable than watching ITV programming. Just pointing it out. But no, there are the questions have to be asked. Luton Town. I think Luton Town have gone through the mill themselves. They've gone out of the Football League and come back. They've made a lot of progress as a club. But the troubles with Luton Town started when Mike Newell, their former manager and an ex-Blackburn player, highlighted corruption in football. He made reference to bungs, which is corruption with agents and transfers, and suddenly he's out of a job, and we are where we are. The League One playoff preview. With so many playoffs going on, it's hard to keep track. I actually have to double check who actually is in the playoffs, because I'm going to make an arse out of myself if I don't get this right. Who's in the playoffs for League One? Let me just double check who's actually in the playoffs, because I haven't followed League One really this season. Let me just double check something. Let's go BBC Sport. I'm actually having to go on and use do some research here. Yeah, the Coventry City ground share with Birmingham City has been announced on every website now. Yeah, deals in place. The EFL has now defended corrupt owners. Without them, fans would have a club. Without fans, football's dead. So how out of touch is that guy? I'm still trying to find the League One playoff. Where is it? There's the we want League One. Okay. So 3 Charlton, Sunderland. I don't like either club. I'm not gonna lie. I'm really not. I'm not gonna lie about Charlton, Sunderland. Charlton is a toxic club. Sunderland is a toxic club. There's a big proportion of their fan base that is exceptionally vile. I don't have any time for either club, really. I'm not really bothered who gets through that playoff. I really don't care. That's my personal opinion on it. I don't have a prediction. I don't have a preview. The documentary on Netflix is embarrassing. It's not great. It's cringe. I hate it when sports teams do these insider documentaries where it's a fly on the wall kind of thing. It shows how all that documentary shows is how bad Sunderland were in that period of time and how much of a joke a club they were, how badly run they were. how Man City. Oh yeah, we bought the league for a couple of years or for eternity. We cheat financially to get an advantage, and we have a half-empty stadium. That's basically what I've inferred from Man City: is the empty Etihad, where they play crowd noise to make it seem like there's an atmosphere. Most of their fans that turn up to games now aren't true fans. They've only been coming literally since they started winning trophies. And a lot of them don't even realise the struggles the club went through between the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and the early 2000s. They have no idea about the history of the club. They are clueless. Grotty owners, grotty club. That's my opinion. Yeah, they're winning. Great. Even before they were winning, they were a grotty club with the new ownership. I preferred it when they were Man City without this Etihad and overseas ownership and all that dodge. I actually just preferred it when they were the old main road Man City. I actually rooted for them as the underdog. Now I don't care. Their fans are classless. I don't know. Manchester's got Bury. More people in Manchester support Bury than Man City and Man United combined. That tells you something about Manchester. You know, oh yeah, God's Last Woman Standing or something. That was a shocking program. There's a reason why that wasn't renewed. There's been loads of these flywheel documentaries about football clubs and managers or sports teams. Like HBO them for the NHL. I've got to a point now where these plastic fans, they are plastic. Chelsea fans, I've got a lot of mates who are Chelsea fans. I've got subscribers who are Chelsea fans, but my God, there is a toxic element to that fan base and a plastic element to that fan base. I've got to a point now where there's bandwagons and glory hunters, and then there's just plastics. And the Etihad is half empty. They're pumping in fake music to increase crowd noise for TV. They can't win the Champions League. All that money's spent, like PSG. They can't. They can't win the Champions League, much like PSG. They bought a league and they can't win the Champions League. So I just scoff and laugh. I've reached a point now with football where I just can't stand it. It's becoming a tacky sport. It's becoming very tacky, and true fans, real true fans who actually have supported a club for their entire lives, can't afford to go. And that's where football dies a little bit. That's where a sport dies, when the true fan base cannot afford to go to a game. I would say all clubs that have plastic fans that have success. I think Leicester and Blackburn, as the underdogs, really connected with their local communities, which had been through thick and thin with them. I actually honestly believe some of the clubs, Liverpool, they have not won the league title for how many years? Always sell out Anfield. Newcastle haven't won the league title for how many years? Always sell out St James's Park, for all the flaws of the ownership of that club. No, there are some disgusting fan bases. Southampton, last trophy they won was in the 70s. Regularly sell out St Mary's. Regularly, not always, but regularly. Bournemouth, never won a big trophy. Always sell out the Vitality. Yes, it's a small stadium, but they've never had a non-sellout crowd since they've been in the Premier League. They're happy with their club. They are a smaller club and they're a good club. Wolves, they've expanded their stadium because the fans keep coming back. More and more keep coming in. I wouldn't say they're only big because they're in a one-club city. You could say that about Sunderland. You could say that about Carlisle, one-club town. A lot of clubs are in one-club locations, but Newcastle, they haven't won a trophy for how long? They always sell out because they're passionate about their club. It doesn't matter where they are, what league position they're in, what league they're in. You will never see an empty seat. The day you see empty seats at St James's Park is the day that the world ends. The thing is, we were told when the Sky Sports came about and all the other pay-per-view sport channels that ticket prices would stay low. They're not. The average working man and woman and their families, their kids, who may have supported a club for generations. It's a family tradition to support the same team. Okay, can't afford to go to games. It's becoming a rich man's game, and unfortunately, that's only like 5% of the population. that can just afford to actually have the outlay to go to every game a season of top flight football. And no, it's killing it. It is killing it. And fans are rightly getting pissed off, but again, they're not listened to. And it's going to take proper action for things to change. Because I don't know how long Wolves can keep it at £18 now. They're going to be in Europe next season. I will be. Wouldn't be surprised to see prices skyrocket at Wolves over the next couple of years. I love watching sport on TV. I do. I do. Because it does avoid the cost of going to games because it's unsustainable. It's unfair. I cannot afford it. But I do go support my local ice hockey team. I only missed, I think, 3 home games this last season and 3 playoff games. So yeah, I was pretty hardcore. I spent a lot of money going to watch my local ice hockey team play. But that's because British ice hockey is very limited for the TV coverage. With the TV coverage we do have, and the second tier of British ice hockey doesn't have a TV deal in place as of yet. It does have some streaming deals in place with some online providers, but there is no TV deal in place yet. I think that will change in a few years' time. But I go to a lot of home games. The atmosphere is far better than watching on TV. But do you know why I go? Because it's affordable. It's a community club where people from the local area go. Same with any ice hockey team in this country. Regularly, we've had a few sellouts this season, which is good, and the team have finally become better as a team. Again, for a very long period of the level they play at, not a lot of success, and they were once national champions of the top level in this country. So, we regularly used to sell out. Recent years, there's been less to enjoy, but the true fans still turn up. I don't know. I think Burnley just had a poor start to the season and picked it up as the season went on. I think Wolves play in the right way. They play football in the right way, and they've got the money to spend. I don't think they're going to struggle as much as Burnley did. Burnley were a team on a budget who did great things, and I think had an off season. But we've seen teams with money like Chelsea have off seasons. Chelsea were woeful a couple of years ago, so anything's possible. You never know. Wolves might even win the Europa League. I honestly don't think the FA and Premier League want the small teams to win, but no. Yeah, well, we say that we'll constantly make European finals. For how long didn't we do it? The last time there was an all-British final, I think, was 2008 in Moscow. Now we have 2 all-English finals. I wouldn't necessarily that's a given. I don't think that's necessarily a given. The football is only as good as the players produced, and I don't. The issue is there's too many overseas players, too many overseas managers, and there's a lack of connection between the players and the fan bases they play for. The top 6 in the EPL this season, couldn't tell you. I think Spurs, they have to win the Champions League this season, otherwise that could be a. I'm going for Liverpool and Arsenal for the Champions and Europa League trophy winners. I think Chelsea. I don't think Sarri's got the big game mentality to win a trophy. He's already lost a final with them against Man City on penalties. I think Arsenal will win that one, and I think Liverpool are going to beat Tottenham because they've been to the Champions League final before, and there's a history of that competition. Tottenham have not been to a cup final as with this group of players, so and Tottenham regularly fall apart in that big pressure one-off game. Honestly, I couldn't tell you who, but that predicting is not my forte. Very rarely do I get a prediction right. So the few predictions I got right was a European winner of the World Cup, an all-European semi-final lineup at the World Cup. That I got right. I got 2 out of the 3 relegated teams in the Premier League correct. I got the league winner wrong. Standard. If I get these 2 predictions right, I will shave my hair off. If Arsenal and Liverpool win, my hair's coming off. I'm having a skinhead for the summer. If they don't win, I've proven that I'm crap at predicting. So there you go. I do think there's too much. What's overshadowing, as I said at the beginning of this live stream, and I said yesterday, is and the Mkhitaryan video on it, is the Europa League final in Baku. The issues surrounding that final are overshadowing all the hard work the teams have done to get to this point. Is the negativity surrounding the Europa League final is overshadowing next week's football. It's overshadowing everything completely, and I have concerns. I should do a Premier League prediction at the start of the season, shouldn't I? Where I think I did that. I think this season, where I think teams will finish, and I'm off with so many of them. I don't get a lot of them right. I really don't. I did a prediction earlier this season with the Premier League, and I got a lot of them wrong. East Asian talent. I would actually rather see the Premier League teams promote more local youth, their youth systems, than buying overseas players. That's my personal opinion. I think we need to get a higher percentage of players playing week in, week out who are eligible to play for England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. We do not have enough homegrown talent. That's a problem. That's my personal view. When we get to about 60% of players playing on a weekend who are got British passport, then yeah, absolutely you can get the overseas talent in on. But I think we need to look at why the teams in Europe are more successful internationally, and that's because they promote their youth through their system and rely less on overseas players. That's my personal opinion. I don't think you should have to bring in a rule, but I think you should encourage it. I think you should encourage clubs to promote more. And when you've got less than 40% on a weekend being domestic players, whereas the German league's as high as 60% some weekends, there's a reason why Germany's won more World Cups than England. I'm just going to put it out there. There's a reason why the Germans are more successful internationally than England are. They have a higher percentage. There is no rule in German football saying that they have to have a minimum number of homegrown talent. It's just the German system has evolved in a way where the federation works with the clubs to ensure that the youth systems keep producing talent. Now, yeah, they had a bad World Cup last year, but look at the percentage of players in German football who are German nationals. English football, English nationals. There's a 20% difference, 20 to 30% difference on a given match day weekend. That is not good enough. And at one point, it was as low as 20% on a match day weekend on an average. So we have to see. The reason why Major League Baseball has that Asian talent is it's Major League Baseball and baseball in general is really popular in Japan and the Philippines because of the US military after World War II. Because they could do great under 21 and under 17s because they play together in the youth setups, but they don't get enough time at senior level. There you go. They don't, for some reason, the clubs are phobic of promoting youth into their lineup at senior level. And they'd rather spend stupid amounts of money to get an overseas player in when they've spent a smaller outlay developing youth players at relatively low cost. I don't know. I don't understand. I do not understand. I'd rather see more young talent coming through. And if that's through one club and get transferred to another, I don't care. I'd rather see more young British talent come through into the British league system and systems and play, because that is the only way you're going to have more competition for places at the national side, and the players will push each other, and the national team will benefit because there's a bigger talent pool to select from. So that's my view on that. I've always been clear on that. Not enough young talent is playing. The Germans do it so much better. That's one of the positives of the German system. And a lot of the German system is fan involvement as well. The fans demanded it, the clubs gave them it. There is no rule in place saying the Germans have to have a minimum number of players who have German origin. The fans demanded change to German football. The clubs were like, if we don't, we will anger the fans. The fans are our customers. Bang. And the German club system, it's a voluntary system. They don't have to have so many German players, but they decide to. And there's a reason why they are so good at developing youth. It's because they not only promote the youth, but they put the youth in the main lineup. The local academy system is great to a point, but it's flawed. It's exceptionally flawed because overseas talent is brought in to supplement the local talent. So we're not just developing English players here, we're developing overseas players, which I think is something that needs to be looked at and addressed personally. But it's the global game now, so we reap what we sow. And you can thank Jimmy Hill for the overpaid players. Yeah, because he battled to have a minimum, well, he battled to have the salary cap removed. There was a cap kind of system in place where salaries were kept within an average, and he battled to have the top ceiling removed. So you can thank Jimmy Hill for the unsustainable wages that we now have. He's dead, so we can't answer for his crimes, but there we go. Now, Jimmy Hill was former Coventry manager, battled to remove the upper earning limit for players. So now their earnings can be as high as they want. Beforehand, before Jimmy Hill battled in the 60s to remove that, yeah, earnings were actually sort of, there was a soft, flexible cap in place. Now there's not, it's gone. Thank Jimmy Hill for that. Jimmy Hill was actually changed football for a negative. At the time, absolutely positive decision. It meant it was actually viable for people to actually stay in football. And careers were lengthened because it was financially viable. Then came the pay TV era, and it got out of control. And I think it's too late for a salary cap now. But yeah, Jimmy Hill changed the face of professional sport. Other sports followed suit. And in recent years, sports have gone, we need to control costs. Football, for some reason, doesn't. Other sports have gone, actually, it's a good idea if we just cap the earnings a little bit and control the earnings. They're getting out of hand. We cannot sustain this. Football, no, let's keep this unsustainable spending going. Yeah. Oh God, look, I look at North American sports, and the average salary is as high as it's ever been. Oh God, yeah. No, the job security of a manager is 6 to 9 months now, average. So they don't have any job security. It's the problem. There is no job security. They're automatically under pressure as soon as they're appointed. They may sign a 2, 3, 4, 5 year deal, but really they're out within 18 months of that deal. And then the club has to pay them compensation for sacking them, which actually costs them more than just keeping them in the contract for the 5 years. It's bizarre. Football has got this weird kind of thing going on where it's just the money's out of control, and job security for coaches is minimal. And they wonder why there's not enough ex-players getting into coaching. Well, there's no job security. There's none. So it's the way owners act now is actually harming football more and more and more, and eventually it's just going to implode on itself. The bubble has to burst at some point. Other sports have realised you have to control costs, and they're trying their best to keep costs down, but whilst also making sure that the sports are profitable. And this is why the Women's Ice Hockey League in Canada went bust. It wasn't profitable enough, and the players wanted to get paid too much, and it wasn't making any money. And the debate about women's equal pay is, regularly comes up. And Fran Kirby, the women's centre forward, football, has obviously made reference to the point, if we win the World Cup, the debate on equal pay will be stronger. Well, while I appreciate, her views on it, until women's football can attract the fan base and the fans to games to actually make it profitable, if women's football players were paid an equal to men's in this country at the top level, women's football's bankrupt. And it will be bankrupt literally overnight. It would kill women's football stone dead. The quality level isn't there yet. Not enough clubs are professional yet. And there's not enough money in the sport yet. Now, they have got a sponsorship deal and some TV deals in place that are eventually the money is coming in. But I don't know. I mean, tennis, you have mixed doubles, so that there is the mixed doubles competition in tennis where men and women play together, and that sort of weakens the equal pay debate, because when it comes to mixed doubles, they get paid equally, but you get paid for the work you do. More people watch men's tennis than women's tennis until you get to the late stages of a women's tournament. So that damages that argument, because the crowds aren't there in the early stages of a tournament until the Serena Williams gets to a final and then has a hissy fit and loses. That's where the money is. And yeah, we discussed this yesterday about the equal pay debate and the commentator debate as well, about female punditry and female commentators and pitchside reporters and stuff like that. I would much rather see a competent pitchside reporter than someone there because of their gender. The female presenters and commentators that I mentioned yesterday are good because I remember their names and they're competent. when it comes down to it, I'd much rather see a female presenter or commentator there who is competent, who's there for her skill set, rather than because she's a female or she's a person of color or it's an LGBT. This is where I think broadcasters are going too PC and are fearful of the PC lefty brigade kicking up a fuss. But the amount of commentators, both male and female, who are not competent, who've got a job because of the color of their skin, their background, their gender, is just. I'd rather have competent commentators and presenters and journalists irrelevant of their gender. But the PC brigade has said we must have more women involved in sports, so they panic and they just promote anyone to the position before they've really cut their teeth. I don't mind Gary Lineker because he's more insightful than people realise. His Twitter feed's interesting. He does make some pretty bold statements on there, but no, I don't mind him as a presenter. He's been doing it now. He's been doing it now for over 20 years. He's pretty competent at what he does. He's pretty good at what he does, to be fair. But some of his co-hosts and pundits I can't stand. I miss Alan Hansen. That was a good balancing act to have on the show. Alan Shearer, he's very intelligent, boring voice. Alan Shearer would be great as a coach, as an ambassador, absolutely. But as a pundit, he's not got the voice for TV or radio. He's got the intelligence for it, and his football documentary on head injuries was really enlightening. But as a presenter, it's painful to listen to Alan Shearer. It makes my ears bleed. I love the guy as a player, but as a media personality, he's not as good. Mark Lawrenson, he's got that sense of humour that not everyone gets. But he's a divisive figure. But he's very intelligent about the sport. But again, he has one of those voices that isn't really suited to commentary or punditry. It's just he doesn't have that passion in his voice. He's a little bit just sarcastic. I think he's too sarcastic, but he's exceptionally intelligent. And there are those that do actually like him. I don't mind him. But I'd rather the debate about inclusion and inclusiveness and the broad church. I get that, but you have to promote based on ability rather than just she's female, he's black, let's back them in. Because Ian Wright, great player. As a football fan, he has passion. As a pundit, I'd rather cut my eardrums out because they're assuming the audience that they're talking to is as thick as he is. He's got the brain. It's just how he comes across. He comes across as a fan down the pub, and that is cringe for TV. But that's ITV. He does a lot of punditry for ITV, and it's painful watching England games with Ian Wright in the studio. I prefer Jermaine Genius over Ian Wright, but that's my opinion. Dean Ashton is actually underrated as a pundit. He does a lot of the Football League programming on Quest. I think he deserves a shot on a mainstream channel like BBC or ITV or Channel 4. Dean Ashton is very, very good. Clarence Seedorf as an overseas player and Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank are very good as pundits as well. Hasselbank's obviously had a difficult time in management, but as a pundit, he's pretty good. Ow. Oh, that's better. Peter Schmeichel, when it comes to discussing a goalkeeper and his position, he's very, very good as a pundit. But Robbie Savage, for all his flaws, I don't mind. He's quite entertaining. The best the BBC NFL pundits, Ossie Unamanoya and Jason Bell, they're brilliant. The fact is they're talking about a sport that I don't like very much. If they were talking about rugby union, rugby league, ice hockey, football, European football, they have the intelligence there, they have the knowledge there, and also they like other sports other than the NFL, which is really, really great. I do like Jermaine Genius because he's only recently stopped playing, and he's a very well-spoken individual. He doesn't get overexcited. He's very calm. He's very thoughtful as the colour commentator alongside the play-by-play, if that's how you want to term it. Jermaine Genius was exceptionally rated. I've seen Peter Schmeichel on there. I think they need to get more ex-goalkeepers as pundits. But I think they're fearful of the goalkeeper because of the fact that all goalkeepers are mad. The goalkeepers union, all goalkeepers are absolutely insane. But Peter Schmeichel's been on a few times. They need to get a wider kind of We've got loads of centre forwards. The Dutch guy is Ruud Gullit. Ruud Gullit is on a lot. He's been on Match of the Day a lot. Clarence Seedorf has done the World Cup. Clarence Seedorf was brilliant with the BBC team at the World Cup in Brazil. Absolutely brilliant was Clarence Seedorf. He is one of the most intelligent guys you'll ever see. Jermaine Genius. I mean, look, I do like Jermaine Genius. I do appreciate when Spurs aren't playing or Newcastle. When a team hasn't played for or playing, he's good. But he does get a little bit, how do I put it, Homerish when it comes to Spurs or Newcastle, the teams that really gave him a platform to play. But when Spurs and Newcastle aren't playing, he's brilliant when he's on the TV. He's good at international commentary. So when the World Cup's on or the Euros next year, you'll see Jermaine Genius a lot. You'll see him do a lot of punditry. But oh god, no, we do need to have more goalkeepers as pundits. I mean, we've got loads of midfielders, defenders, and centre forwards. Peter Schmeichel is the only goalkeeper I can think of who has, been on as a pundit on not just British TV but other broadcasters as well. He has been on. Neville and Carragher I can't stand. Phil Neville as a coach is really good. As a commentator, he makes my ears bleed, and he took a lot of flack for his commentary, but actually he's very intelligent when it comes to football. But he doesn't have the voice for commentary, and that's the shame of it. I would say the goalkeepers are the bassist actually of the band rather than the drummer. The drummers actually they are mental though. The goalkeepers, they are. You got to look at the greatest goalkeepers. Some of their antics are just out there. But I do think we need a more balanced view on the goalkeepers union, because the pundits regularly slate the goalkeeper. I don't know. It's Sky Sports. What do you expect? Dan Rowan can mock the dead and infer that the dead have been having extramarital affairs hours after they've burnt to death in a helicopter. How's he still got a job with the BBC, considering that he's also made comments about Crewe Alexandra and some of the abuse scandal there? And Dan Rowan is just a prick. Carragher, I never liked him as a player. I've met him. He's a bit of a character. I'm not a fan of him. But that's my personal opinion on these people. Their employers obviously see differently. The thing is, the difference with Dan Rowan and Jamie Carragher is Carragher very quickly came out and apologised. It was painful watching his apology because they basically were baiting him on national TV. But he came up very, very quickly of his own accord and apologised. But the way he was baited by his colleagues at Sky was pretty cheap as well. The way they handled him was disgusting. His actions, absolutely deplorable. His apology literally the next day, where he literally said, "Get me on Sky News. I'm going to apologise on a public platform and say that is unacceptable," straight up. But then the way that the presenters were baiting him all day during his interviews was cheap on Sky's part. And then the BBC baited him as well. I just thought that was some really tacky journalism. He's fucked up. He's done something that if I did in the street, I'll get arrested for. Absolutely deplorable act. Then to keep baiting him for weeks afterwards, that was shitty by Sky. That was shitty by BBC. It was shitty by Channel 4, Channel 5, and ITV. All the major networks in this country baited him. Oh God, she was so outraged. Come on, this is Sky News. It was the way she baited him. I watched that entire news broadcast and I was like, actually, you're more of a scummy organisation, not for suspending him, but the fact that Sky Sports, as the sister company, the amount of their commentators and pundits who've been done for sexism, racism, assault, gambling issues, Paul Merson, how many more times does he have to come out as an alcoholic? And Paul Merson is an absolutely hopeless commentator. He's an absolutely hopeless pundit, yet he still has a job. He's not good at his job anyway, and he's got so many issues off the field with gambling, alcohol, and drugs. How has he still got a job, and how are they not putting him through help? Oh God, yeah, it was a shocking broadcast, and I was like, you're just baiting him now? They kept showing the incident over and over again, and he's just like, oh shit, yeah, I fucked up. Can you move on? I'm apologising. I'm taking my suspension. I'm going to discuss things with anger management. He was very honest about his foul up, and his employers kept baiting him. like it was good TV. I thought, Jesus Christ. But no, Sky Sports have had a litany of employees who've done things, and yet they keep employing the same type of people. So there's a lot of sexism within like Sky. And what I've noticed with the Sky Sports female presenters and the news presenters, they're basically like, cabaret girls. They literally are there for their looks. Whether they whether they want whether they're competent in their job or not, and some of them are very, very good at what they do. Have you noticed they wouldn't be out of place in an adult film, for example, or a strip club with their looks? That's where Sky go for. Whereas BBC go with the older female who's experienced, and it's more about their ability rather than what they look like. Sky is a very sexist organisation. For all their we're fighting plastic pollution, all this leftist crap they come out with, all this PC crap, actually behind the scenes, Sky is a toxic organisation that has allegations of sexism, bullying, racism, homophobia, members of staff with drug problems, alcohol problems. Sky is a toxic organisation. Oh God, no! Sky Sports is basically, very similar to Italian and French TV and Spanish TV. Put the attractive woman on the TV, whether she's good at her job or not. And most of them actually are good at their job. I will admit this. Most of the female presenters on Sky across Europe are very good at their job, but they're also got massive boobs. They're there for their looks more than their actual intelligence, and it actually objectifies them. The Sky Group, which Murdoch set up, which is now being broken up slowly, is a very sexist organisation. The women who are on there are not there for their experience and their knowledge and their work ethic. They're there partly because of the way they look. You look at the BBC, you look at ITV, you look at Channel 4, Channel 5, other channels with a presenter. She's there because she's competent first. And she's worked hard. If she happens to be attractive, that's a bonus. Sky, it's the way around. They've got to be sexy as sex appeal first, quality of production and what they produce second. And I've noticed that throughout Sky Sports broadcasts, if there's any female involved as a presenter or as a pitch side reporter, they're there for their looks over their quality of presenting. Same with BT Sport. Last year, the Europa League final, the girl they had as the pitch side reporter was so out of her depth. She was a bubble blonde, as I call them, bleach blonde. Stereotypical, I know, but she was so out of her depth. She was not there for, her ability. Robbie Savage had to basically carry her through that broadcast. Now, Robbie Savage has got a lot of flaws in his character, but he carried her through that broadcast to make sure she was okay, and she got through a very awkward. She was struggling as hell. She was really out of her depth. Savage, as an experienced broadcaster now, and as an experienced person who's been around the sport a long time, sees she's struggling and gets her through the broadcast. And you can see on his face, he's like, why have we got her here? She's not suitable for this role. She's not competent enough. Not that she shouldn't be there. She's worked hard, but they've promoted her because, look what she looks like. And it's basically one of them. It's basically, this is the issue with Sky. I find, and BT are the same. Anytime I see any BT Sport broadcast I can manage to watch, the female presenter, again, very seductive clothing, very attractive. Many of them are competent, but they're actually there for their looks more than their actual abilities. It's a known thing. The BBC tried this with some newsreaders where they put some younger female newsreaders who were there for their sex appeal over their qualities as journalists. And that's an issue I think the mainstream media needs to work on, is to stop objectifying these women. Because it's all well and good with them banging on about, we're being objectified as sex objects, we're not comfortable with it. Well, then stop agreeing to dress provocatively on your broadcasts. There you go. I would say I prefer some of the hockey broadcasts. Some of them are pretty funny. On the NHL, Nick Kyprios is just. I'm waiting for him to say yet another dumb comment so I can laugh. Tim and Sid. Sometimes when they're not getting the faux outrage, they actually are pretty good broadcasters. But the reason why they got the job on Sportsnet is they had a podcast, and Tim and Sid used to shout a lot and get all faux outrage to people who liked that. It's getting a bit tacky now, but when Tim and Sid actually have a serious conversation with a guest about a serious issue, they're actually pretty good broadcasters. Although Sid Sixerio, some of his faux outrage is just clickbait. It's just there to get views. It's not there to be serious. It's so scripted. It's painful. But Brian Moore is hilarious. Brian Moore, when he loses, his Twitter feed is brilliant. Brian Moore on Twitter is absolutely hilarious. I love Brian Moore. But Brian Moore, when he's discussing a player doing a silly penalty in rugby, he goes, "It's dull. It's just dull." Bearing in mind, this is a front row forward who's missing half his teeth. This is a guy who's missing half his teeth, and his face is all twisted, and he looks like a Picasso masterpiece. Yeah, Brian Moore is a brilliant commentator, brilliant journalist when it comes to anything to do with rugby union. Absolutely brilliant. I would have him over Jeremy Guscott and John Infidel and Jonathan Davis has got the most annoying voice, and his views are he's so out of touch with. Jonathan Davis winds me up. Can't stand him. Infidel, can't stand him either, and Guscott, he's okay, but Brian Moore is I think the best commentator they have. It's interesting they never have him in the studio as a pundit. He's always the commentator, and I think they're worried about what he's going to say in the studio when he's not commentating, when he's just going to let rip, because he will F and blind, he will swear all day long, and they don't want that on a live broadcast in the studio. They want to hide him away in the commentary booth with the play-by-play guy who's calming influence, who's normally that Scottish guy with he's paired with, and that normally keeps Brian Moore level-headed. But Brian Moore was brilliant because he says it how it is. We need more people like that in sports media who are not so PR PC. We need to have people like Brian Moore. He's got personality, he's got charisma, and he says it how it is. He doesn't give a flying monkeys if he offends someone. He tells the truth. He's one of those ex-players that has. Oh God, Jonathan Davis is the most biased commentator. He wants the Italians to lose every time. He wants the Scots to lose every time. Jonathan Davis, though, he's so out of touch as a commentator. He's so out of touch when it comes to, okay, so you played the game once, and you also went to rugby league and played that as well. But there's a problem, Mr. Davis. You never actually bothered to get involved with coaching the game. You've sold your soul to make money as a broadcaster. You never actually wanted to get involved in coaching and give something back to the sport. So shut up, you annoying little squeaky Welshman. That's my view on Jonathan Davis. His rugby league commentary is shit as well. He played rugby league for a few years and was hated by all of Wales for doing it. And then he came back to Union, and suddenly they loved him again. Did they? And then he retires and goes, "Oh yeah, I'm going to retire now." As a rugby league player, he was brilliant, but as a commentator, he's so out of touch with modern rugby league. It's unbelievable. He hasn't played the game for nearly 30 years. The game has evolved massively since he played, and he's never bothered to coach, be it league or union. He's never bothered to do his coaching. So I can't stand Jonathan Davis, because had he done some coaching and given something back to the game, yeah, thumbs up. You're still a knob, but okay. No, I don't know why the BBC persist in hiring him, because he's just so anti everyone who isn't Wales. He's the most biased commentator. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a big Wales fan, and there are, but I feel sorry for the Welsh fans with the club gaming in such a bad state. No mention of that on many of the broadcasts. They try and hush that up. And Jonathan Davis just, I've seen bits of the documentaries, and I've seen interviews with players past and present who obviously switch codes, and because Welsh Rugby Union has a phobia of rugby league and wants to destroy it, hence why Welsh Rugby League is such the mess that it is. If someone like Jonathan Davis could actually encourage more, Iestyn Harris. Now, Iestyn Harris is an ex-Rugby Union Rugby League player that I have a lot of time for. Who's Welsh. He's one of those few Welsh players that isn't a biased wanker, because not only has he done the commentary, he's done the coaching. He's gone through the coaching, and he's had to battle with both the union, the Welsh Rugby Union, and Welsh Rugby League and the RFL to get any funding for the team's grassroots level. He's battled with the unions. He's battled with the federations. He's always up against it as a coach with no budget. Iestyn Harris is a player I've got a lot of time for as a dual code international. Iestyn Harris is a top bloke. I prefer to have him commentate union and league over the scratchy voice that is Jonathan Davis, because he's still involved actively in the game. He's still grinding away at the coalface day in, day out in rugby league. And I think he's far more qualified to talk about what's going on in the sport because he coaches in it. He's battled at the coalface for years, whereas Jonathan Davis has never coached a day in his life. He walked away from the sport and became a commentator, and a pretty poor one at that. Yestin Harris. I'd much rather listen to Yestin Harris and what he's got to say as a pundit, as a commentator, as a presenter, as a guest on a TV program than Jonathan Davis any day of the week. I'd much rather listen to Yestin Harris. Brian O'Driscoll, he's a very intelligent individual. It's a pity he's not involved in coaching, but I think he's very well suited to the media role. He's made his money whilst playing anyway. He's very suited to the media role. He's very good at it. He just eases into it. He and Gordon Darcy have really gone from playing to media really well. They've just eased into it. They're a good centre partnership, and occasionally on Ireland games, you've got Darcy commentating and O'Driscoll as the pundit. They work well when Darcy's commentating and Driscoll is the pundit. They've got a voice for TV. They've got a face for TV. I think Gordon Darcy's got a bit more of a cricket face than O'Driscoll, which is a little less attractive. But they work really, really well. I couldn't give a fuck if the Welsh fans hated me. They just don't like criticism. They can't take criticism because they think I'm a sour Englishman. I didn't want England to win either, for fuck's sake. I don't give a fuck about the Welsh fans hating me. I hate them as a toxic fan base. They as a fan base as a whole are toxic. There's a minority of Welsh fans that are toxic to fuck. They abuse their players to the point where the players go, I don't want to play rugby anymore. I don't want to play the sport that I love because the fan base are really shitty. And there's a big minority of Wales fans who are toxic as fuck, and I just can't stand them. They are a toxic fan base. The real fans are the ones I care about. The ones that come out for the internationals and think they know everything and are toxic, just like football fans. I thought rugby fans were going to be more intelligent and not so fucking toxic, because you have to look at the online abuse that the Welsh players face when they have a defeat. The shit that Rhys Priestland gets online on a daily basis staggers me. Cuthbert gets crap online daily. And I'm thinking, hang on a second, these are some of the best players you've ever produced in the modern era, and you're giving them death threats because they lost a game. No, they are. Welsh rugby fans are toxic to fuck. They couldn't give a fuck about their club game, and there's a reason why the club game is in such chaos. They don't go to the club games. They only go to the internationals. They actually give a toss when the national side doing well. They couldn't give a fuck about their clubs. The few fans that turn up week in, week out, the loyal fans, are the ones that I would really want to sit down with and talk to, because what I've seen over the last 2 years is the Welsh Rugby Union fans, when it comes to internationals, are toxic and disgusting. I've had no problem from French fans, Irish fans, Scottish fans. There's one or two that I disagree with, who pop on the channel every now and then, and I tell them to jog on. But for the most part, the Scottish fans are pretty cool. Irish fans are pretty cool. The French are actually so honest with how bad their team are. I love the French fans. They're brilliant. The Italians are pretty cool. North American fans are pretty cool as well. Canadians and US, they're pretty cool. I've got Australian fans. They're pretty cool. They're pretty honest with the assessment that I've given on Australian Rugby Union over the last 2 years. Kiwis, yeah, all right. South Africans, no problem with them. I'm more than happy to debate rugby union with South African fans. It's Welsh fans and a minority of them that are toxic to fuck, and I'll stand by that. And I hope they don't do well in this World Cup. I really do, because then I'm like, well, okay, you've had this nice long win streak without playing well, but you're still a toxic fan base. You don't give a toss about your club game. The few fans that do are ridiculed, and there's a reason why your club game has gone to shit, because you don't support it. Yet you give when your players lose a game or have a bad run of form, you give them death threats online, because that's a rugby thing to do, isn't it? And your union's mismanaged to hell. How they managed to win the Six Nations, I have no idea. I really don't, because the game is governed so badly. The fans are vile, and the players, I feel so sorry for them. I have to admit, it's a minority of Welsh fans, but it gives the rest of the fan base a real bad name, because the abuse they gave to Rhys Priestland and Alex Cuthbert online because they weren't playing well for a period of time. They're not going out there getting 80 minutes a weekend, getting the living crap kicked out of them, and also giving out some big hits as well. They're armchair critics who like drinking SA Brains, because that's a disgusting beer. There is a minority of Welsh fans who are disgusting to fuck. They are a toxic fan base. No, I wouldn't say the All Blacks are. I think they are showing a lot of signs that they are human, and there's money issues with the All Blacks. In fact, Southern Hemisphere rugby has got massive money problems. And I'm not sure going forward if Super Rugby is sustainable in its current format. I don't think the All Blacks are still favourites. They've shown that they are actually starting to show some signs of weakness. I don't have a pick. I think this is the most open World Cup that we have possibly ever seen since '99. I honestly think in the modern era, the last 20 years, it's the most open tournament we're going to see. Northern Hemisphere, far side of the world, weird time zone. It's going to be interesting. It is going to be interesting. I think it's the most open tournament we've had in a long time. And with what's happened to Australia, with the Israel Folau saga, what's happening with Tonga, Fiji, and Samoa threatening to boycott, Namibia having some money issues, we may not even have the lineup of teams that are here now. May not be the lineup that actually takes the field. It does have the ability to be the most open tournament. I think the All Blacks are now starting to lose games that they were winning a couple of years ago. These tight games against Ireland, they were pushed all the way by England. They are starting to look very human, but they are still obviously the bookies' favourites. But for me, I think it's the most open tournament you could have in a generation, and that's a good thing. But at the same time, rugby union's got so many issues. And to go back to the Welsh fans, the abuse that Jonathan Davies, well, I don't like him as a pundit and I find him annoying. The abuse he got as a player with the other Trailblazers who went to league, they were getting death threats from Welsh Rugby Union fans, and the Welsh Rugby Union deliberately tried to strangle the life out of Welsh Rugby League and still continues to do so to this day. Welsh Rugby Union, the union itself is toxic behind the scenes. A minority of fans, mostly in Cardiff and Swansea, I'm gonna add. There's a minority of them who are really vile human beings. Same with football as well, and it stains it for the rest of them. How Wales managed to win the World Cup, not the World Cup, the Six Nations, sorry, with the club game in absolute chaos, players not sure if they're going to have a career to go back to post World Cup, what club they're going to be playing for, if any at all. They're trying to drive through this new team in North Wales that no one seems to want. When a player has a bad game like Reece Priestland and Alex Cuthbert, if they are ever selected ever again, they get vicious threats online. Yeah, I think that's my view on the Welsh fan base. They've never they always dislike my rugby videos. They always have. They always have and they always will do. I don't give a toss. I really don't care. And if Wales do win the World Cup, great. And that fan base is still going to be a toxic, shitty fan base. I really couldn't care, win or lose. A minority of those fans built my opinion about that fan base. It's the same with Chelsea fans. It's the same with Man City. Same with Liverpool. I hate them as well. Oh God, I don't give a fuck if they win. So what? Big deal. Even if they lose, they're still going to be shitheads. They can't take criticism when the team aren't playing. I even said the team aren't playing well and they're winning. And I was being critical about their tactics against England for the first 60 minutes. And apparently, I don't know what I'm watching. I'm clueless. Apparently, I should stick to fucking football. I'm a fucking clueless. And some of the shit I got off them, it wasn't like they disagree with me. They were really shitty to me. And I'm like, you know what? I don't give a fuck about your fan base anymore. I don't give a fuck about your country. You can win, you can lose. I don't care. Win or lose, you guys are cunts. And yes, I said the C word on the live stream. I said a naughty word, not PC. I didn't get it so much from Twitter. I got it mostly on the YouTube comments section. You just have to look at the comments section of every video involving Wales, and it just is constant. It is constant. I got it last year in my preview for the Six Nations from some Welsh fans who just gave it constantly. And in the end, I was just like, I've given up trying to tidy up this chat. Just, God, you guys are really disgusting. And I leave those comments up there to prove how vile these guys are. I lost a couple of subscribers out of it, but then it worked out how vile they were as well. It's Sex and the City, so if you're watching that, you've got problems. Like, you have some issues if you're watching that program. At the end of the day, like the toxic abuse I got for like 2 months this year from a minority. There were some Welsh fans who went, actually, you're pretty bang on with that assessment. We're not playing well, but we're winning. How long can we keep doing this? Because they cannot play like that in the World Cup and expect to come away with a win. They really cannot. I've said that time and again. They have to play an 80-minute game. They did it once in the entire tournament, and that was against Ireland in the last game. The previous games, they only put in half a performance. They cannot afford to do that. Oh God, would you stop? No, right. Look, look, tacky TV and film programs, things made for middle-aged women who like red wine on a Wednesday evening after work. No, just no. Ally McBeal is the one where it's at. Now, moving on from tacky 90s and 2000s TV and film. No, yeah, the abuse I got. So what? I've had, for the most part, the majority of the time, I've had a pretty positive experience on the platform. But that 2-month period highlights all the issues. Metrosexual, no, sexually comfortable TV diet is the term there. But that 2-month period was the worst 2 months I've had on this channel. I'm so glad that at the moment there is no rugby union internationals being played. I'm so glad because yeah, I got to the point where I was like, do I really want to keep doing this? Twitter was fine. It was literally the YouTube, and it was a small minority. Well, it was actually a sizable minority actually that were pretty vile. And I look at it across the board, and I leave the video up there. That one particular video I leave up there, and I'm like, read the comments, and I'm just like, that's actually some of the more pleasant stuff that I got. There was some really, I got death threats from Welsh fans. Yeah, I got death threats, and no, I got death threats, which I obviously did delete, but that is from the top. And this is why my statement: Welsh rugby fans are toxic to fuck. I'm standing by that. I don't care if that offends you, but that minority, and it's a sizable minority, have not only been toxic to people like me on YouTube, who are for me, I'm outside the box. I when it comes to rugby union, I support Ireland and Italy. I might live in England. I might have a nice English voice. My dad's family of Irish heritage. My aunt is married to an Italian, and I've lived in Italy. So for me, the rugby that I follow is Italian and Irish rugby. So what if I've got an English accent? That's the rugby I follow. South Africa is my favourite Southern Hemisphere team because my best friend who passed away, was a South African, and I have a lot of South African friends. That's the rugby I support. That's the rugby I support, and I don't support England. I've never liked England because that's also a very toxic country to support. English rugby union is just as toxic as Welsh, both the players and the fans and the union. And yeah, I got death threats. I had some guy threaten to put a brick through my head and find out where I lived in that 2-month period, because it wasn't just the Welsh Rugby Union videos that were called. There were some other videos as well. I had someone from Holland, want to put a brick through my head, and I'm like, okay, mate, cool. A friend of mine writes IP tracking software, so I can find out where you live. You Dutch prick. But no, yeah. Wales weren't playing well. They won the tournament because guess what? It's a team game, and they found a way not to lose. They forgot how to lose, and that's great. And the players were doing it under really testing circumstances. They weren't playing attractive rugby, and that's what I was criticising. Is the rugby they were playing was not attractive. The rugby they were playing was not great, and I said that. I was very clear that they're playing very poorly, but they're winning. At no point did I say they didn't deserve to win, or that England weren't terrible in that game, or that they weren't. I highlighted the fact that Dan Biggar was more effective as a fly half than Anscombe throughout the entire tournament. Apparently, I don't know what I'm talking about. I got to a point with Welsh Rugby Union fans where I was like, you know what, you're just sons of bitches. I cannot stand you. You are ruining it for those who want to have a reasonable debate. And you're giving yourself, and Welsh rugby fans do have this bad image with a lot of rugby fans across Europe. They do. It's not just me, but it's the same with some football fan bases. I've had shit from Villa fans, Wolves fans, Everton, Liverpool. I've had a lot of shit from Liverpool fans. Really can't stand them. Both Manchester clubs get a lot of crap from them. I've had crap from fans of European clubs. And yeah, I've had crap from Tranmere fans when I was trying to do a positive thing about Tranmere last year about their promotion to the Football League. I got some shit from some Tranmere fans. This year hasn't been so bad. But no, I've had tons of toxicity, and it's only in a very small period of time, very small period of time, and most of it was at the beginning of this year during the Six Nations, and it was mostly Welsh Rugby Union fans, but there was some other toxicity in there from other sports fans. I had some death threats from some Americans. I I had some issues with some Americans over JT Brown, ice hockey player, who was protesting during the national anthem. You know, I got some shit from some Americans for that. And yeah, most of the people giving me abuse had no content of their own to back up the shit they were giving me. That's what I find funny. Most of the people who criticise me in a shitty way while they're having a debate saying, I think you're wrong, I think this is the way forward, but I understand where you're coming from. Most of those giving me the death threats and the abuse and the crap have no content of their own. And they're bot accounts. They really have no say of their own. They haven't got the balls to sit in front of a camera like I do and say why their point is valid. None. And I have to admit, the way I went about that Wales England video wasn't possibly the best video I've ever done. It was actually pretty poor quality by my part. I will admit it wasn't the best way to describe it, but my God, as the days went on, the toxicity grew. So weeks after the event, people were still giving me crap for that video, and I'm like, well, okay, cool, great. And this is something I've noticed with social media. I've seen this on a lot of things. I've seen it with women's football, the abuse that they get. I've seen it with the debate about should women be pundits for male sports. I've seen that a lot. You don't, and I've seen it on a variety of sports aimed at black people, black players, other players of ethnic minorities, players who play for certain clubs. Liverpool get a lot of it. Liverpool either give it out or get it dished back to them. Football is a toxic environment. This is why another reason why I'm so glad that football is not my favourite sport. If you think the rugby union is bad with the Welsh fans that I had, you should check out some of the abuse some other YouTubers get for football and some of people on Twitter get with football. It is, it's there. And there are some sports that are far more toxic than others. And we've had it with the World Juniors on ice hockey, with the Canadian team losing. They got a lot of crap, a hell of a lot of abuse. These are 18 and 19-year-old kids. They got a lot. It's becoming more prevalent the last couple of years, I think, and social media has allowed this to fester and get to a point where it's getting to the point where is it just a keyboard warrior or is that an actual death threat? Because we've now seen people in public life get murdered because someone online has started to rant and rave and give the threats, and then someone's idiotic enough to pull out a gun and shoot a politician dead in her local constituency. That's where we've got to now. And it's more than just milkshakes being lobbed over Tommy Robinson and Nigel Farage. That could be a knife or a grenade. Lads, I got crap for criticising the fact that there were 2 pitch invasions in 6 hours and players were assaulted. And one of the guys was actually going, I'm not condoning it. That's cool. I said, well, what was if he's got a knife? Oh, but he didn't. Okay, then. What was if you're walking on the street and I punch you in the back of the head? You wouldn't like it, would you? So, yeah, there was those pitch invasions with what happened with Smalling and Grealish and the fans attacking them. There's an attitude there with the football where it was not being condemned by a lot of people. A lot of people were actually cheering them on. Yeah, there's that. Grealish is an idiot. I'm not gonna lie. Grealish is a bit of a tit. He's not the most intelligent when it comes to his actions, but this is why I'm so glad the sports that I follow are far less toxic than football and rugby. Rugby union is becoming more toxic. Rugby league is getting that way a little bit in certain aspects, but football and rugby union are starting to get to the point where I'm not enjoying them as much. And I highlight the Welsh fans because they've dished it out to their own bloody players. These guys who put their heart and soul into playing for Wales have 1 or 2 bad games. They're getting death threats online. Football players. I mean, Danny Rosa probably isn't the best spokesman for racial rights and race relations, because when he says the fine Montenegro got is the amount of money I spend on a weekend out, doesn't make you seem down to earth, mate. It doesn't make you seem because the amount of black people who idolise you, who obey the law, who don't get involved in gang crime, don't have that money to throw away. That damages your argument. And I got into a debate down the pub with a person that I know about the Danny Rose comments. And I said, I'm not picking it out because he's black. I'm picking it out because he's an idiot. His comments damage the argument for better race relations and to fight racism, because he's now seen as an entitled black guy. Yeah, even you as a Welshman are admitting that Welsh Rugby Union is a toxic environment in the union itself, in the federation, and the fan base, and that says something. And this is where we need more people who are reasonably minded fans to come out and out these idiots, because Welsh football, apart from Swansea versus Cardiff, which will be happening next season, which I dread, apart from Swansea Cardiff, that rivalry, and Wrexham Shrewsbury, it's not actually that bad. Welsh football, it isn't actually that bad. Welsh Rugby Union is a very toxic environment with the fan base, the structures of the game, the running of the game, the way the sport's governed, the finances. The whole Welsh Rugby Union is a vile mess. It's tried its hardest to kill rugby league, a sport which could actually help rugby union by clubs could go dual code, and rugby league could massively help rugby union in Wales. If the clubs went dual code, the clubs that are struggling financially could have that extra income by sharing, the player base and sharing the fan base all year round. But they choose to try and kill rugby league at birth. They try to strangle it. And yeah, without competition to drive rugby union to be better, it's dying. You need to have that competitiveness with other sports to try and improve the product. The Welsh club level, as I say, Swansea, Cardiff, and Wrexham, and Newport to a certain extent are pretty vile fan bases. I'm not going to hide from that. But guess what? These thugs can't actually afford to go to games anymore, and the international ticket prices are a lot higher than club games, so they're priced out, which is kind of a good thing. Plus, Wales barely get to international tournaments, so they don't have a platform to be idiots abroad, which is also great. Apart from the Euros a few years back, but no, Welsh sport has a toxic element. Yeah, but there is a toxic element to the two biggest sports in Wales, and it's mostly in the Swansea Cardiff area that the toxic element is. Football fans in general, the last couple of years have seen a rise in the hooligan element, not just here in the UK, but also in Europe. So we're not that bad compared to some of the European countries when it comes to football violence, but we are on the rise again with some idiots. And again, it's a minority, but they seem more brazen in their attitude and their approach to be, the hooligan element. And I'm not so glad on that, because I think it makes it harder, because each country has different laws of entry and what punishments for the hooligan element. And I don't know. I'm a bit concerned about Euro 2020, the security side of it, because it's all spread out, and each country has its own different laws on curfews and policing and security in stadiums. It's worrying for 2020. I think because it's so spread out, you can't contain the problem. And because you have the Schengen area, you can just drive across Europe. Once you're in Europe, you can just go across Europe at will. There's no border checks. Once you're inside the EU, you can just travel at will, unless you are on a wanted list. Oh God, yeah, no, there is definitely a club country debate with Wales. The fans were so well behaved in 2016. They were a credit to Welsh football. It's a pity at club level they're not the same. It's a pity at club level they are so vile. And Cardiff are, I think, the worst, followed by Wrexham. They're pretty bad. Unless you're Julian Assange. Well, Julian Assange decided to hide in an embassy and live like a hermit for 8 years. So there is that. Takes an Australian to mock an Australian, I suppose. No, the Euro 2020, I'm looking forward to the tournament as it's an international tournament. I'm really looking forward to it and to see what quality of football we're going to see, because it's an expanded tournament. There's more teams playing. I am a bit concerned about the security aspects of it because of it being over multiple cities. But we'll have to see what happens at the end of the day. It's a year away, so not every team's qualified yet, so we don't know what the final lineups are going to be. The Women's World Cup is obviously in little under 2 weeks' time. I think it's next week it starts, if I'm not mistaken, or the week after. The Women's World Cup is going to be fun to watch. And the people mocking women's football or saying it's shit, don't watch it then. Simple. I've just answered, well, if you don't like it, don't watch it. I think, well, yeah, I mean, look, you've got to look at some of the, I mean, at the end of the day, it's always nice to see new subscribers, come to the channel and stuff and buy in. And I try and not cover football as much as possible anymore. I've got to the point now with football where I've fallen out of love with it, to the point where I will report on it. I will, find out a story that I think is a big story and look at it. But I got to the point where I got so fed up with all the managers getting sacked and these overpriced transfers and wage requests that I was just like, I'm not enjoying this sport anymore. I'm not enjoying this sport anymore. I haven't enjoyed it for a very, very long time. Oh god, yeah, people who like they hate something love to mention it every opportunity and say, I'm not watching it. Well, then don't then. I don't watch the F1 because it's become now so dull and so predictable that if I want to watch a traffic jam, I'll just sit on the A30, which is one of the main A roads on the area that I work covering on my bin round. And I'll just have a day off and sit by the A30 and just look out the McDonald's window on the A30 in Camberley and go, that's a traffic jam. I'd rather watch that. Yeah. That's my view on F1. I've stopped watching it a long time ago. And I think NASCAR is better because guess what? They actually have accidents and they overtake. That's my opinion. I prefer NASCAR to F1, but this season, with some rule changes, I haven't watched it. I've watched 2 races of NASCAR this season. I'm not watching it this season. I'm not happy with some of the regulation changes. MotoGP put behind a paywall in this country. They took it off free-to-air TV and whacked it on BT Sport. So again, it's less accessible to watch now than what it was 5 years ago. Big mistake by the broadcasters to allow that to happen. I found as a YouTuber, the sports that get the best responses are rugby league. Rugby league has a great following on this channel. The rugby league videos, I've got a great following from rugby league fans on this channel from around the world. My ice hockey videos, when I do them, I've got a decent following there, and I'm gonna have to do a Stanley Cup final preview because I'm getting bored without any NHL hockey. And yeah, I do have a pretty hardcore following from people who follow my favorite sports. My favorite sports actually have better feedback than my league's favorite sports. I've got to a point now where, yeah, I've got a lot of fans of football who follow the channel, but I don't enjoy football anymore. But I will report the big stories. I've always said that. I've always said, like, I may not be the biggest fan of football anymore, but I still will report the big stories. And football is a never-ending cycle of managerial sackings and overpriced transfers and players getting. I mean, this summer's going to be massive for transfers. I think we're going to have a lot of movement this summer. A lot of players are going to move this summer. There's links. They're linking Sergio Ramos with the Man United. Ed Woodward's got to go. Has to go. I think where sport has an issue is the toxic fan base element. And I'm seeing it more and more and more in some of the sports that I do like, with certain teams having a really toxic fan base. I'm going to be watching I'm assuming that's the Champions League final. It's on BT Sport, but it's free on YouTube. BT Sport stream it on YouTube. So I'll be watching the Europa League final and the Champions League final, doing match reviews of them. And I will not be holding back when it comes to being critical of the Europa League final. I'm going to make reference to the fact that there's not enough of the club's fans there. I'm going to be very critical of UEFA. I'm not going to hold back. I'm really not going to hold back when it comes to looking at the Europa League final. I'm really. This is one of the reasons why I've had enough of football, and I think football needs to have more people step away from the sport and stop watching it, stop buying tickets, because you've got to hurt the sport to change the sport. I think the sport needs massive reform. It's not happening because the fans are too loyal. Fans are too loyal, and I think the fact that half the ticket allocation given to Chelsea and Arsenal was returned, that's a step in the right direction to say we're voting with our wallets, we're voting with our feet, we're not going to participate in this anymore. We're going to protest by staying away. That's the only way change is going to happen, is by voting with your feet and your wallet and not give the crooked owners money, crooked UEFA money, crooked FIFA money. And just when they realise viewership on TV is going down as well, change will happen. Change will happen. Because if you don't give the customer what they want, your business model fails. And I think, as a rule of thumb, football fans across the board who are not hooligan elements have had enough, utterly had enough. And I look at Scottish football, the element, the sectarian hooligan element there. I look at English football with the rise in disorder here, Welsh football with the disorder between Swansea and Cardiff fans on a regular basis. Now they're going to be playing each other regularly next season. That's going to be a concern. I look at hooligan elements across Europe, but I look at the mainstream fans who've gone, we are not happy with the state of football. We are not happy with the direction it is going. So when La Liga said we're going to play games in North America, and the response from not only fans but players as well, they've sent half the ticket allocation back, have Arsenal and Chelsea, because fans just don't want to go. They do not want to go halfway into at the edge of Asia to watch a game. It's not feasible in 3 weeks to get the time off work, book tickets, which are extortionate for a plane, and get there. It takes 59 hours if you're flooring it on the quickest route with perfect conditions to drive there. So that's over that's nearly 5. Is it 12? That's 24. That's 3. That's nearly 4 days of driving to get to where you got to get there. It's not. You would have to leave now to get to Baku. And yeah, the Amsterdam final was brilliant, and that was the perfect city for it. Baku, they've chased the money on that one. And yeah, there is issues to getting to the game, and the fact that only 12,000 tickets out of a stadium capacity of 68,000 were given over to the two teams in the final was the first mistake, and then the pricing of those tickets was the second mistake, and then the resale price of tickets through official resellers at £5,500 was within a day of going on sale. Yeah, that sums up the issues that is insane. And yeah, the distance is because you've got to go through border checks on some of the countries. Once you get across the English Channel, you have to go through border checks on the Bulgarian-Turkish border, and then you have to go through border checks on the Greek to Turkish border. You also have to go through border checks to get through Serbia and Montenegro or Macedonia, depending which route you take, and Albania if you go that route. So there are border checks at many borders on the way. So there's about 6 borders you have to get through where there are armed border checks just to get to Azerbaijan, avoiding Ukraine. If you were to go through Ukraine into Russia, where you're very likely to get shot with the border conflict, you can shave off about 10 hours, but because the roads are better quality. The Turkish roads are terrible quality and dangerous. Oh God, really? No, I really wouldn't. The fact that you could drive across a whole continent or a whole country like Australia in that time, which is huge. Yeah, that's how crazy it is to get there. It takes about 3 days, 3-4 days. And that's with 5 people in the car, rotating the driver every 5 to 10 hours with regular rest stops, regular fuel stops, regular food and drink, rotating the driver of the car and making sure the car doesn't break down. There is no traffic, roadworks, other disruption, all sorts. Yeah, the way that UEFA have gone about the organisation for this final is poor. Even though it was awarded a year and a half ago, and we knew last season the final was going to be here, the fact that no country east of Slovakia were in the quarter-final stage said that this was going to be a problem come the final, regardless if it was all English or otherwise. The fact that at the quarter-final stage, the furthest east you had to go was, I think, the Czech Republic or Slovakia to get to a game in the quarter-final stage, said that choosing Baku was a really stupid idea. Had a Turkish side got to the final, it wouldn't have been so bad. It would have been less of a scandal because Turkey borders Azerbaijan. Would not have been a problem. The issue is when we got to the quarterfinal stage, we knew pretty early on that all the countries would have at least difficulty getting to Azerbaijan, and that's what it's proved. It's a shambles. It's a shambles from start to finish, and it is what it is. I mean, had a team from Portugal got through, that's even further away. Had a team from Sweden got through. You have to think of some of the locations of clubs that were in the Europa League this season. Had a team from Norway got through to the later stages, it would have been a farcical that they got through. So it's not just an all British final problem; it's a European problem from the aspect of getting. There's no direct flights, for example, and to drive is 59 hours on the safest route, and there are some dangerous routes that people have to take. So yeah, the whole organisation of this final has been poor, and now the travelling fan groups, the supporters trusts are complaining to the two clubs, saying you're not doing enough to get us there. Those that have got tickets, they're going, how the hell are we meant to get there? Bear in mind, these clubs are worth hundreds of millions, if not billions of pounds. They've got very wealthy owners. They're only taking 3,000 fans each. That's 6,000 travelling fans. They're not getting the help they deserve from the two of the wealthiest clubs in English football, and that's shameful, absolutely shameful. The club should have paid for the fans' transportation and made sure the fans got there safely. Or UEFA should have footed the bill. They've got enough money, but no, they're not interested, and it's a sham. And and yeah, the Mkhitaryan issue, I've covered that in a video as well. The fact that he doesn't feel safe going to Azerbaijan because he's Armenian, he's very likely to actually have death threats and be detained at the airport, and a whole variety of issues. Armenia and Azerbaijan have been in a semi-state of armed conflict since 1988 when they were both part of the Soviet Union. There was an ethnic conflict, and then it's turned into a territorial, geographical conflict as well over a disputed area of land that both sides dispute. And there has been a brief war, and they're in a semi-state of armed readiness for war at all times. And the average population of Azerbaijan and Armenia is exceptionally poor. There's massive poverty in the two countries. There's the time the conflict started, there was a massive earthquake, which has contributed to the poverty as well. Armenia and Azerbaijan are actually, surprisingly, even though Azerbaijan is oil rich and Armenia has some resources as well, they're exceptionally poor countries. The wealth is held by a very small proportion of the population who are oligarchic criminal types. There's very little money in there's poverty is rife, corruption is rife. Oh yeah, UEFA. Oh yeah, semi war zone. Let's give a European final to a country that's having an issue with another country. Oh yeah, there's some Armenian players playing top flight European football in Western Europe. oh yeah, they're not. Mkhitaryan is not going, and he's a big reason why Arsenal are there. That is shameful on UEFA. Shameful that his safety could not be guaranteed. And but it's like if the final was in Tbilisi and there was a Russian player, or the final was in Moscow and there's a Georgian player, the same principles would occur because of the geopolitical conflict in the Caucasus between these various countries. It's just, yeah, it's the national stadium, so it's going to host athletics as well. It is one of those stadiums. It's a big stadium, mind it. It's a very big stadium. I mean, England have played in that stadium in World Cup and European qualifiers against Azerbaijan. It's a massive stadium. But the atmosphere is going to be pretty poor. There's not going to be. Oh yeah, of course they care about the money. But this was decided back in 2017. And there's a lot of issues with governance of football. The Qatar and Russia World Cups are two other issues there. The Russia World Cup, there's definitely corruption behind that. And the Qatar World Cup, when Christ, even in winter in the desert, it's still 30 degrees daily. And, the treatment of the workers in Qatar is disgusting. The human rights abuses happen daily in Qatar. Same with Azerbaijan. There's human rights abuses, corruption, detention without trial. There are massive issues with football governance and corruption allegations dating back to the 70s with FIFA. They are chasing the money. They've chased the money over the social outcry and player and fan safety. They've gone after the money. They've gone after the money, and Azerbaijan is not a pleasant place if you disagree with the regime. Human rights abuses happen regularly, and they are in a semi-state of war with Armenia. Oh God, yeah, the Aviva Stadium, the new Lansdowne Road is a beautiful. I don't like the big glass window at one end, but I have to admit the stadium is Croke Park is a beautiful stadium. Lansdowne Road, the rebuilt Lansdowne Road is a beautiful stadium as well. They're two world-class stadiums in Dublin that should get more recognition for what they are. They should have more top flight international sport take place in those stadiums. Absolutely. And they are beautiful stadiums. I actually prefer Croke Park over the Aviva, the Lansdowne Road rebuild. I prefer Croke Park as a venue. I think it's the nicest stadium. For me, it's just a better stadium. But I understand why people like the Aviva. It's a beautiful stadium. I have no disagreement there. But that's what you got when you got two world-class venues in Dublin. Beautiful stadiums. Oh bloody! There we go. People are saying, "Oh, you should have played the game here or play the game there." I mean, some of the stadiums they have chosen are top-notch stadiums. I'm not going to lie. There are some brilliant stadiums around Europe, and there's some great venues. But at the same time, it would be nice to see some new cities get a final that may be easier, more accessible to get to, other than Azerbaijan. But at the end of the day, I'm still going to watch the game. I'm still going to review the game. I'm still going to give my viewpoint on the game, and I will be very critical of the atmosphere. If the atmosphere is just dead, which I have no doubt it will be, then yeah, I'll be critical. And I think UEFA have made a huge blunder with the ticketing allocation for both European finals. Not enough tickets have been given over to true fans. Too many corporates. Oh yeah, the allocation for the Atletico final as well is poor in the Champions League. Yeah, they get 10,000 more tickets per team, but that still is not enough. Not enough. That's not good enough. It's not. It really isn't. Too many corporate tickets. It's wrong. It is wrong. And I think what needs to happen is fans need to start boycotting. Fans need to start boycotting. And at the end of the day, oh yeah, there's going to be so many fans. They always say don't travel without a ticket, but they're not going to have that issue in Baku because no one can afford to get a ticket. But the Champions League final, there's going to be thousands, tens of thousands of fans who travel without tickets. And then there's the risk of disorder and all that kind of palaver that always goes with it. But what can you do? When you're not given a suitable allocation, what are you going to do? And for Tottenham fans, it's their first European final in how long? So the Tottenham fans, there's going to be a lot of Tottenham fans going without tickets. For them, it's their first. A lot of Tottenham fans, it's their first cup final they've ever seen. For others, they haven't seen a cup final in over 11 years since the League Cup final they won back in 2008. So for many Tottenham fans, it's the first final they've ever seen. And for others, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity because they may not get back to the Champions League final again. This could be their peak. This could be their moment. Liverpool fans have been here before. A lot of Liverpool fans have done this a lot with European finals, be it UEFA Cup, Europa League, kind of the old UEFA Cup, Champions League. They've been here before, but no, for Tottenham fans, this is their first. For many, it's their first European Cup final. Essex, the what I call Spain on Sea, or Essex, a la España. There is a lot of there's about 2 million Brits living in Spain, or 1 million, depending on sources or whatever source you read. But there's going to be a lot of fans going ticketless, yeah, and that's a concern that the Spanish authorities have every time. If UEFA gave over an equal distribution of tickets for each fan base and less corporates, wouldn't be a problem. And the plane ticket prices for both finals have been deliberately overinflated more than normal, which is disgusting. They've taken advantage yet again, and that's not gone down well. And UEFA have been criticised again for ticket prices and travel costs, which there should be agreements in place, and you know, we'll have to see what happens. We'll have to see what the atmosphere is like at both finals. We have to see with the Champions League final how many fans do travel without tickets, and if there's any disorder, which would be a shame if there is. That would be a crying or shame if there is. The fan bases have to behave, because it shames football. It's not just English fans though; it's European fans across the board have been misbehaving more and more as the last couple of years have progressed. Been a lot of disorder at European club games as well. That doesn't get reported over here because it's not part of the narrative. Because it's not an English hooligan, it's not part of the narrative. But actually, there's a lot of trouble on the continent with football violence, and it does shame the sport. But this is a sport that's had an issue with football with fan violence for like 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years and has done nothing to stem the violence. So, oh god, no. If you've got Tottenham and Spurs and Liverpool fans mixing, is never a good idea because the fan bases really hate each other. It could be a powder keg, and that's the fear. If you have ticketless fans who do a lot of drinking, because beer is a lot cheaper in Spain than it is in England, yeah, you're going to have a flashpoint. You are going to have flashpoints. I've got books. Where are the books? I've got some books up here on the subject. I've got hooligans. And they're interesting read about some of the antics, the thuggery of the 80s and 90s. It is really an interesting read. There are some funny stories in there as well, but for the most part, it's pretty brutal, like stabbings, curbings, people dying in these punch ups. Oh god, look! At the end of the day, I think the chief of Madrid police is probably shitting bricks, thinking about, okay, we've got people from the north of England and the south of England, basically lots of Brits who are on the piss, and there's already an issue with the lads' culture in Spain and in the Balearic Islands and the tourist resorts and the violence that goes with that. And a lot of the locals have started to have enough of the Northern European tourists going to Spain and just leaving a mess and fighting each other and the drunken violence. It's not just a British thing, it's the Germans, the Scandinavians, they all do it. We just get labelled as the thugs, but they all do it. It is a powder keg in Spain. I think they're going to behave in Azerbaijan because hardly anyone's going. But the Spanish Champions League that could be a powder keg there. Let's hope not. Let's hope I wouldn't say us are the worst travelling fans. I actually think the Germans are pretty bad. The Dutch, the Poles, the Czechs, the Slovaks, the Italians are toxic as hell. The Austrians and Germans are pretty bad. The Scandinavians are slowly getting worse. The Dutch, I think, are possibly the worst in Western Europe. The French are vile. The Swiss are starting to get more militant as well. I think you'll find, because it's not reported as much by the British media because it's not part of the narrative. But I've been to Europe, I've lived in Europe, and I can safely say that our fans are nowhere near as bad as continental Europe. I think we started it, we exported the idea, and the Europeans went, okay, these guys are better than us at this. We need to get better, and they did, and they got more organised and far more violent. And I honestly do fear about Euro 2020 a lot, and we'll have to see what happens in the two cup finals, and then that's the European season over, and then we can focus on the transfer window, the Women's World Cup, the Rugby World Cup, the Cricket World Cup. We can focus on other things because what we're discussing here about the ticket pricing, the chance of disorder, the issues with UEFA. This is why I dislike football. The way proper fans are treated is abysmal. We're all labelled as hooligans abroad when we're not, and we're not the worst fans in Europe by a long stretch, a long way. European fan bases are far worse. But we're discussing all the negatives about these two finals. These could be the two best European games we ever see in our lifetime. That's the possibility we have. Or they could be two dour finals that are settled on penalties. Either way, both European trophies have been won by Britain for the first time, or England, in the same year. And that's something that we haven't done before. And whether you like the clubs involved or not, and I'm not a fan of any of the clubs involved, I will say this as a positive sign for English football, that at least at the club level, at least, we've got some pretty quality teams at the moment. But we are, so far in this live stream, discussing all the negatives that are coming out about football. Pricing of tickets, the hooligan element, why they chose a stadium in Azerbaijan for one of the finals. We're discussing all the negatives more and more. Hardly any positives have been discussed about football. Every other sport we discuss, we can discuss anything. There's a lot of positives. My rugby league videos. I mean, there's one topic I do want to talk about with rugby league in the NRL, and that is the issue surrounding Jack de Belin. Because of the NRL's no fault, no stand down policy kind of thing. So if you're not being charged with an offence and you're found not guilty by the police, you can continue to play. He's been charged with a serious offence. He's facing up to 15 years in prison. He is not allowed to play. He's appealed, and his appeal has been turned down. So he took the NRL to court and said, "I want to play until my trial date." His trial date could be up to 2 years away. His rugby league career is over. Because of his bail conditions, he can't come over here to the Super League to play. And the Super League has said, as long as he's suspended by the NRL, we are not touching him. So Jack de Belin, I personally believe he'll be found guilty, but regardless, it's setting a precedent for players in the future. The no fault stand down policy. He's allowed to train and keep in shape, but he's not allowed to play. He's allowed to keep his salary, but he's not allowed to play. It is setting a precedent for future indiscretions. If there's a player having an indiscretion, it is setting a precedent. And if you don't know who Jack de Belin is, check him out on the internet. Read up about what's going on. The no fault, no stand down policy has been criticised. No one is supporting Jack de Belin here. I think it's the principle and that's been set by the NRL going forward, is that down the line another player might get himself in some legal trouble and could be found innocent, but could have to wait up to 2 years for a trial, and his career is effectively over. And this is basically what we're seeing with Jack de Belin. This is a key point of his career, and it's a difficult one. He is getting full pay, and he's allowed to train. He's just not allowed to play. And his trial date for the charges he faced, which are exceptionally serious, of a sexual allegation nature. Yeah, from what I've read and from what I've seen, it looks very likely he's going to get a custodial sentence and he's going to be found guilty. However, if he is found innocent, that's 2 years of his career he's lost. And, it is setting a precedent for future legal issues for players. And that is a worrying precedent that is being set by the NRL, because I'm not disagreeing with the fact that they had to do something about Jack de Belin, and all the negative off-season press that has come the NRL's way with players and teams and coaches and all that misbehaving. And there had to be enough is enough, because the public relations image that the NRL was suffering was huge. But the Jack de Belin situation in the NRL and for rugby league and actually sport in general is setting a precedent that has some worrying consequences for those players who may have minor indiscretions, because they could apply this to minor indiscretions as well, like drink driving or speeding tickets and court appearances, to more major stuff like what he's been accused of. It is setting a precedent, and it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one to get right and balance out. But yeah, the precedent's been set, and he's tried to legally challenge that precedent, saying I want to play, and he was unsuccessful in his appeal. So now a legal precedent has been set, and it's going to be interesting to see how the NRL deals with further player misbehaviour in the future. Ben Barber, not found guilty of any offence, not charged with any offence, sacked, banned for life. Jack de Belin, charged with a serious offence, is still getting paid by the NRL. While he's not playing, he's still getting paid his full contract. So that debate is it a thing of to do with race because Jack de Belin is white and Ben Barber is of Aboriginal Torres Strait origin. There's that debate as well. So there's a whole host of issues to discuss. The NRL is trying to save face with the negative off-season it had in 2018, beginning of 2019. The amount of scandal over Christmas really damaged the NRL's image significantly. And they've been very, very reactive in their response to all the scandal. And if you are an NRL fan or rugby league fan, Todd Greenberg, who's the CEO of the NRL, is under a lot of pressure. A lot of people want to see him. It's like Ryan Carter of Rugby Australia with the Israel Folau thing. Todd Greenberg's under similar pressure with the NRL and Rugby League in Australia with his handling of all the scandal in the off-season and what this code of conduct and his zero tolerance policy is. It's having mixed consequences, and there seems to be one rule for one player, one rule for another player, and it's at the moment the off-field stuff with the NRL is exceptionally toxic. And I don't personally think Todd Greenberg is the right man to lead the NRL forward because since he's come in, it's been scandal after scandal after scandal. And it's a never-ending supply chain of scandal with rugby league in Australia off the field. Oh no, they are throwing him under the bus, absolutely. But I think he's going to get I think he's done as a player. I think even if he's found innocent, his career's over because no one wants to touch him. He's going to be a toxic brand. But it seems they've learned nothing from Brett Stewart a decade ago, and the way they handled Brett Stewart was terrible. And from what I've read and all the interviews that have been and all the articles written and all the information available to the public domain, it looks very likely that he is going to go to prison. I'm not defending Jack de Belin in any sense, but the precedent that's been set for future players, the NRL could say any indiscretion that involves a police charge could mean the no fault, no stand down until court date. And that player might only get a fine or a community sentence, like suspended, and is not allowed to do his job. The way Todd Greenberg has in his period in charge, it's been nothing but scandal throughout. It started with the peptide scandal, that will be aftermath of it, and it's just been constant salary cap breach, this player indiscretion, that the ongoing the peptide scandal still has a way to run. There's still things coming out about Stephen Dank and all the machinations, how badly run the sport was and how badly governed the anti-doping was. And now we are getting to players committing serious offences and each one having a different slap on the wrist. Greg Inglis was still allowed to train and play for his drink driving conviction, right? Ben Barber, not convicted of anything, accused of domestic violence, banned for life, thrown out of the game, not allowed to be signed by anyone, career over. He hasn't even been charged with anything. Jack de Belin, charged with a serious offence, is still getting full pay. It appears there's, a different rule for each individual player, that I've mentioned there. There are a whole host of other players as well. Like, they tried to suspend Dylan Napa for someone else leaking a sex tape. I'm sorry, but Dylan Napa was not responsible for the leaking of that personal tape where everyone consented to what was happening. That is wrong. And they tried to ban him for up to 6 weeks. He hadn't broken any law at that point. So there's a whole host of issues with the NRL trying to clamp down on player behaviour. But when they're being reactive and they're constantly reacting rather than being proactive and sitting down with clubs and players representatives and players' families and fan groups and everyone involved with the game to say that this is the code of conduct that we expect clubs to adhere by, players, coaches, club officials, fans, this is what we expect of people involved in the sport, volunteers, staff, you name it. They're not being proactive, they're being reactive. So the incident happens, they react. Another incident happens, they react. Rather than being on top of things and regularly having meetings with the players' union, the coaching staff, the clubs, the club reps, the club CEOs, the boardroom staff, and regularly sitting down on a monthly thing and addressing and having monthly meetings or regular meetings throughout the year, they are incident happens, league reacts. Incident happened, leagues reacts. They've learnt nothing from previous incidents. And what it appears to me is certain players are being singled out for harsher discipline than others. And the whole thing is becoming a very toxic off-field environment for the NRL at the moment, and there is obviously a public image problem with the NRL. And there has been an ongoing issue with rugby league for about 20, 25 years, where players who commit some serious offences like domestic violence and alcohol and drug-related offences are allowed back into the game almost with open arms, like no one blinks an eye. And it's only now that Todd Greenberg's finally said we do not tolerate violence against minorities or violence, especially violence against women. It starts now. Well, it should have started 25 years ago, because the culture has infested itself for so long that there's a real toxic culture around every single one of those dressing rooms. Some more toxic than others, and the amount of players that have drink problems and drug problems, like at various points in their career, and gambling issues as well, is alarmingly high. And the NRL is reacting to this, and instead of having proactive, constructive conversations with the clubs, the players agents, the management teams, the coaching staffs, like the club officials, because club officials have been in trouble as well, and clubs have been in trouble. All vested parties with the off-field discipline of everyone involved in the game. They're reacting constantly, and it's got to a point now where, is Todd Greenberg the right guy to take the NRL forward into the next decade? No. Is he the right guy to run the sport? Nope. Is our fans' relationship with the NRL being tested? Yep. Then fans were overly unhappy with the Magic Weekend, from what I could gather. From what I could gather from the feedback that I got of my match review, on the comment section, fans weren't pretty happy. They see it as a gimmick. They see it as a gimmick that the Super League has already done, and they did second. And the NRL is the far better competition. If they can't do something first and they do it second, they've allowed the Super League to sort of do that for TV. It's for TV. Fans don't like all these games being switched for TV. Monday Night Football's been dropped for a reason, because that was a TV-based deal. They were poorer crowds, because fans working all day, it's a working day, they're not going to games. And now we're seeing Super League fans are turning off from the Magic Weekend with the fewest tickets ever sold for the Magic Weekend. So there is definitely, I think, hardcore fans are pretty bored with these gimmicks. New fans will watch if the product is good. To put gimmicks in place to get fans in, they're not the fans you want, because they'll only be there because it's a gimmick. If, however, the product on the field is top quality, new fans will casually tune in on the TV, see it, and go, "Oh, hang on a second, I like this." Or they'll hear about it by word of mouth, and they would want to get involved or re-involved. So the casual fan becomes the hardcore fan, and this is why I like ice hockey. They don't have many of these gimmicks. It's the rules don't change. They don't have these Magic Weekends. They just have regular season games and playoff games. They don't have these gimmicks. But some sports are trying to increase their revenues from fans by having these gimmicky weekends, mostly for the TV audience. And hardcore fans that actually do spend the hardcore money going out don't really. I mean, I have no opinion on the Magic Weekend either way. To me, it's still rugby league being played. It's still a regular weekend to me. But I do get why fans don't like it. I also get why some fans do like it, because it is different. It is quirky. But if you can't get your hardcore fan base on side for the Magic Weekend in the NRL, it's not going to work. And if the Super League fans are starting to decline in number going to games, it says something. And you buy into a product you like. If you don't like the product, you don't buy into it. And I think fans are starting to get a bit tired of the Magic Weekend, and the NRL fans are seeing it as a gimmick. They're copying another league. They could have come up with a different way of doing things. They had double headers at grounds rather than every team playing at the same ground, because it wrecks the pitch. The Suncorp Stadium pitch is known to be a notoriously bad pitch anyway, and by the end of the Magic Weekend, it was completely shot by modern standards. By standards of 10, 20 years ago, that's still a good quality pitch, but by modern standards, that pitch was shot to hell. And then the Brisbane Broncos had to play the following weekend on that same pitch that had just had 8 games on it. That's 9 games in a week on one pitch. That is not good. So there is that to discuss. There were some going state of origin. Should that be played post-season or pre-season, maybe? The mid-season, it screws up the season for some teams, and they have to put weekend lineups out. There are some saying they want City Country back because that's now been dropped as a rep weekend. The City Country, New South Wales City Country, which I used to love watching, and that was a chance for some younger players to get some exposure, some fringe players to get some exposure. That no longer exists. And a lot of this has happened. Excuse me. A lot of this has happened with Todd Greenberg at the helm. A lot of fans are not happy with the direction the league is taking in Australia, and the same over here in the Super League and the Northern Hemisphere Super League. There's a lot of fans who are questioning the direction of the sport and the integrity of the sport and the future of the sport. It's not a new thing. It's a wider sports fan base thing, and it's an ongoing issue that's been there for quite a few years now. There were some good things at the Magic Weekend. The quality of game over the Magic Weekend in the NRL was brilliant. I'm not going to lie about that. That was some brilliant quality rugby league, but not all fans were really happy with it, and the stadium had a lot of empty seats. They didn't sell out Suncorp, so that was a problem. But having all the games over the weekend was in one stadium was okay. They've done it now, but I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we don't have like a county of origin type series for professionals anymore in this country. We still have the amateurs, as you say, but City Country was. I used to love watching it. It was a one-off game. It's one of the oldest games in rugby league, and they scrapped it. And fans loved it. Fans would come out in force to watch it in Mudgee, for example, or wherever it was played in the country stadium. If they played it in the country one, they didn't play it. They used to take it to Sydney, and then out to the New South Wales rural areas, back to Sydney, back to the rural areas. The fans would turn up and watch City Country. They would always sell out games. So I have no idea why the NRL got rid of a working. It was a historical match that's been played for over a century, and the NRL were like, we're going to axe it. And I'm thinking to myself, what a stupid decision, because fans love City Country. Give the fans what they want. You have a healthy product. You take away a product they like, you're going to have some problems there. And it was a great game, but they've changed the rep weekend. The rep weekend's gone now. They get rid of City Country, and now the test matches moved to pre-season and post-season. So I've got rid of that rep weekend, and the Anzac Day test, that's gone now. I used to love watching the Anzac Day test, the Anzac test. It's not a thing anymore. So again, under Todd Greenberg, they've pissed off a lot of fans. A lot of fans are pissed off with the NRL's governance, and I think that's something he hasn't. But the thing is, the NRL haven't ruled out bringing back City Country in the future, so they're leaving the door open for someone to bring it back, and I do think it will come back at some point. Whether it's a mixed Queensland New South Wales City team and a mixed Queensland New South Wales country team, just make it City Country, NRL City Country, where you have Brisbane and Brisbane-born and Sydney-born players in the City team, and then players born in other areas around Australia in the country team. It's not hard. And I think the War of the Roses, the War of the Roses rugby league should be brought back. Absolutely. I think that would definitely get fans coming out from the north of England, especially, and possibly around the Super League fan base would definitely like to watch that. Absolutely. I think that's a great way for the national selectors to look at the best players from Yorkshire and Lancashire. Absolutely. But I don't know whether it should be a best of one or a best of three, but they should definitely consider it, because that's probably better for the game than the Magic Weekend. I think you'll get a better crowd for a one-off or a three-game series game than the Magic Weekend. But the issue is with rugby league in the UK, we already have the Challenge Cup, we've got the Super League, we play more games than the NRL. So player welfare has to be considered. Are we playing too many games? This is the difference between the NRL and Super League. I think we played too many games, and by the end of the season, there's a reason why the NRL is superior. Players are worn out. Players are bashed up and worn out. The season's a month longer, and by the time the season ends, there's a reason why Australia regularly beats England in Test matches. They have that extra month off. They are fresher. They play less games. And that's another reason why the NRL is a superior product, is because the players play less games in a season, and therefore are fresher and fitter and are less likely to be injury prone. This is the massive difference. And, you know, that's why State of Origin works in Australia, and that's why City Country worked in Australia, is because they don't have that secondary cup competition like the Challenge Cup. You don't have that. So automatically they're playing, it works out. State of Origin and City Country were the equivalent to their Challenge Cup in the sense of those games being played by the top level clubs. But the Super League season is also longer as well. It starts earlier. So, player welfare is a big concern. We're talking about player welfare in rugby union, and limiting the amount of games players play. But there's a reason why. I think we have to be careful not to overplay the players. But yeah, I would love to see a War of the Roses. I don't follow the lower levels of rugby league in this country enough to really have an opinion on that, but I do think there should be some kind of Yorkshire, Lancashire kind of county of origin series, War of the Roses type of series. But then you're excluding London Broncos from that, their fan base, the French fan bases of Catalan and Toulouse. You're excluding the Toronto Wolfpack. So you have to be careful about how you do this, because you've got Cumbria as well. You've got Cheshire. There are rugby league clubs around the country, but predominantly they are in Lancashire and Yorkshire. And I think they have to do it in the right way, where they don't alienate the non-M62 corridor, because if they alienate clubs and fan bases from the rest of the English Super League, plus the two French clubs and the Canadian club, then you're alienating about half your fan base or fans, and you have to be careful. You have to be careful, because you don't want to alienate too many fans. Whereas in the NRL, all but three of the clubs are in Queensland and New South Wales. There's only three fan bases that don't really have a vested interest in State of Origin, but actually they do, because the players that are being selected play for both states in those clubs. So you're going to. This is the balance you have to get right. Is the game rugby league is growing in North America. That's great. Rugby union is growing in North America, and that's great as well. We've taken internationals over there, and some have been sellouts and some have been really poorly attended. So at the same time, we have to make sure that fan bases aren't alienated, and you don't turn people off because they feel they're not part of the event. But yes, there are a lot of players from Yorkshire and Lancashire playing in other clubs outside of Yorkshire and Lancashire. The reason why State of Origin works so well is every club in the NRL has at least one Origin player at some point in that club's history. So fan bases will tune to see how their club man is doing, or their club men are doing in State of Origin. But the fact that Queensland won it too many times, I think the Queensland's dominance possibly didn't do State of Origin the favourite. It could have done. It should have. If New South Wales went back to back, okay, suddenly it's a different kettle of fish. But there are issues with the New South Wales lineup. There's some selections that are questionable. There's some players who are missing out, I think, who should be in. There's that debate. But Queensland are post Jonathan Thurston, post Billy Slater, Cameron Smith's, I don't think, playing anymore in State of Origin. So Queensland are in a transition phase. New South Wales, some of their best players aren't available, so they're sort of bodging a team together. This may not be the best Origin series of all. It could be one of the worst Origin series. Very bitty, not the best game. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with Origin. But at the same time, it works better in Australia because every NRL club has at least one player going, or regularly has players getting selected. So there's a vested interest from the club fan bases to see how their players do. It's going to be interesting. I do think rugby league in Europe needs to expand, and some of the old farts in charge, the old Blazers, needs to go, and some of the northern fan base need to realise, that if we are to compete and beat the Australians, we have to grow the game in the south of England, because otherwise we'll be consistently second best. You can't really call it a national competition when there's only like 2 or 3 teams south of Watford playing, professionally. You cannot tell me that is good for the health of the game when, there's so few teams south of the M62 playing at the top level. It's just not good enough. And with the amount of money that is available in the south of England, you could sell that. If the marketing is all wrong, but they could market it and they get some decent crowds. And I think they are missing a trick with rugby league in this country. It is seen as a northerners sport. They need to look more outside the box. They need to grow the game in the south of England. They really do, because that's where the money is. That's where the investment will be. And the game is screaming out for investment, new sponsors, new investors, new owners, new money. Oh yeah, but there's not enough. So there's only 8, 9 players who are from the southeast of England playing for the Broncos. So there's not enough players of a high enough standard in the south of England. I live, outside London, to the west of London. And, for me, yeah, the Broncos are the closest team for me to access in Ealing. I can get there within an hour by public transport. So I can get to Ealing quite easily and watch a game. It's not marketed very well. And it's not just London Broncos. That's rugby league in general is not marketed as well as it could be. Sky Sports has a stranglehold on the TV rights, which I honestly think is killing the game. There needs to be, more games available to free to air, and also you need to expand the game, because if they do not, the sport will continue to struggle as second fiddle to rugby union in the code battle, because rugby union has expanded to the north of England very successfully. There are teams in the north of England. Okay, Newcastle had a bit of a shit season, got relegated, but there are professional teams playing in the Championship as well in the north of England that are well funded and have played Premiership rugby. You've got Sale, you've got Carnegie, Yorkshire Carnegie. You've had Newcastle. Okay, admittedly Newcastle obviously got relegated from the Premiership now, but they've been Premiership stalwarts for a long, long time. Yeah, rugby union is starting to invade the north of England quite successfully, and rugby league is failing in the south. And this new Southern League conference they brought in, is it a gimmick? Is it going to actually pay off? We shall see. If some of these teams that are playing in the south of England start getting promoted to League One and the Championship and work their way up, like the Scholars and the Broncos have done, then absolutely yes, the game will be in a healthier state, because it will increase the player pool, it will increase the fan base, and it will increase the competition for places for clubs. And it will in the end benefit clubs immensely. It will improve the amount of games played in the Challenge Cup, and it will encourage more investment. And you've got to grow the game. You've got to start small and grow the game. And I honestly think the geographical area we're talking about is not massive. It's doable. It's feasible. If the Australians can do it, so can we. If the North Americans in Canada and the US are buying in, why is it taking so long to grow the game south of Birmingham or south of Watford or south of the it's taken too long, and that's, I think, damaged the reputation of rugby league, because the World Cup was a positive, even though we came runners up. We've got the GB side back for this year. And, last time they played in London, they sold out Loftus Road at QPR. They sold it out. So, there is an appetite in the south of England for rugby league. There are enough rugby league fans in the south of England to, grow the game and tap into that unknown resource. And you can convert Union fans because it's the summer sport, it's the summer code. So I'm surprised that rugby union clubs haven't partnered up with rugby league clubs to have a dual code club where you have all year round rugby, just both codes. Oh yeah, the RFL losing are in serious financial difficulty, but they do need to do more. They need to completely look at growing the game in the south, and some of the fans in the north of England are very resistant to expanding the game. They see it as their preserve, their tradition, but at the same time, there's a reason why football is the world's global game. It's because they weren't afraid to go across the world. They weren't afraid to put clubs wherever they wanted. Football really worked out that don't fear going to a new town to set up a club. Don't fear it. Embrace it. And rugby union is not fearing. There's more rugby union clubs than rugby league clubs in the country. Let's put it like that. There's more kids playing union than league in this country and across Europe. So they've got to get youth clubs as well and get state schools and private schools to want to play it. And even if it isn't school based, at least get youth clubs set up and funded. If there's central government funding necessary, so be it. But they need to get the grassroots level working. If that means you get the amateur clubs in the south of England playing and then get promoted, and then if these clubs get promoted to League One, and then have a fist at semi-pro and then professional level, you're going to have progress. It's just. It is, but it's a flawed thinking because rugby union is played all over the country. There's rugby union clubs in every county, in every town. There's a rugby union club or a club nearby. Whereas rugby league, south of the M62, it's few and far between, and that is a real shame. And if the Broncos can actually make a fist of it in the Super League and be successful and be a competitive team, and if the Scholars can also start climbing up the league rankings from wherever, I think they're in League One, if they can get the Championship and then onto the Super League themselves, it adds credence to the fact that rugby league can work in the south. But we need teams outside London. We need teams in the home counties, in the southwest, in the centre of the south of England, in the Midlands, in East Anglia. We need to challenge Union's dominance. And I love Union, but I find League far more entertaining to watch, easier on the eye, quicker paced. For generally as a spectacle, it's a better watch. But unfortunately, the powers that be, both Union and League, don't want to work together. They want to work against each other, and they have done since the 1860s, 1870s. It's been us versus them, and I think that both codes need to work together for the benefit of both sports. You need to have dual code clubs for the benefit of both sports, because at the end of the day, if you don't have that, you lose that competitive edge where you're trying to improve the product. And I don't know if GB or England want to be the world's best, they've got to increase the talent pool. They've got to increase the amount of kids playing the game and adults playing the game and watching the game, because at the moment it's too narrow a player base and too narrow a fan base in the north of England. There's too few fans. There's too few players. And that is where Australia is streets ahead. For a population a third of the size, they regularly beat the shit out of us when it comes to rugby league. Regularly. Their league, the NRL is of a higher quality. Their reserve grades and lower grades of a higher quality. And they have a player base from school through to seniors, to the veterans. They have an amateur league structure in every state and territory. We are so far behind. And we used to be a world leader, and now we're not. And the London Scholars, they also need to be successful, because if London Scholars can get into the Championship and then from the Championship to the Super League, think of the benefits to rugby league as a whole. Think of the benefits. You'll have two London clubs at the top end. That's what rugby league really needs, is both London clubs to be pushing for the Super League and being successful. And then it will keep growing the game. But we won't know until it happens, really, won't we? We have to see how the Broncos do this season, and they're in a scrap at the bottom end. Absolutely, that was expected. But they're not going away. They're fighting to get that fourth win. They're fighting to prove that they belong, or fifth win, or whatever it is. They're proving that they belong at this level on the smallest budget, and they're producing homegrown talent as well. Players from London and the Southeast who've come through their academy, who've signed up for the club, switched codes. The local lads are playing for the Broncos now, and that is nothing but a positive, because it increases the player base, and young kids will see this at trail finals and go, I want to do that. I want to defeat the Northern Monkeys in their mindset. I want to play, and I want to go on and beat the green and gold Australians and the Kiwis. I want to play rugby league. Oh yeah, and it's they're not being left behind. They are fighting to retain, and build. And they're playing. I think they're playing the Leeds Rhinos, and they can quite easily beat the Rhinos. The Rhinos are in free fall, so yeah, they can definitely get off the bottom of the table at the end of this Magic Weekend. They can definitely get themselves up the table, and they've shown some great character in defeat as well. They're not lying down. They are fighting tooth and nail to remain in the Super League, and I think that can only benefit Super League. And if the Wolfpack come across as well, then there are some saying the Wolfpack are a gimmick team. They shouldn't be here. And again, it's the same minority of Northern fans who don't want to expand the game, and they wonder why England and Great Britain keeps getting battered by the Aussies. It's just simple mathematics. The player base needs to grow. But I do hope the Broncos. I might try and catch a Broncos game this season, and catch a. That's. I would love to catch a Broncos game, and and beating Toronto in Toronto was massive. And people are saying, the wrong team got promoted. I don't think so. I think the Broncos can have exactly the same impact on rugby league that the Wolfpack will, if not a better impact. And the Wolfpack regularly sell out their stadium, so the Canadians have definitely bought in, and that's a massive boost and a shot in the arm to rugby league. But the Wolfpack are scary. The Wolfpack are got the budget to be a Super League side. They've got the physicality. They've got the skill set. It's the discipline. They are a brutal team. They are a physical, brutal team. Watched them last year in the Challenge Cup. It was just a punch up. Maybe Super League, maybe rugby league needs that kind of style back, because it's getting a little bit. Super League's getting a little bit too much skill based, not enough power. I love the skill side of it, but there's a reason why the Aussies keep beating us, and that's because they've got the power game as well. They can get dirty and physical, and we just don't do enough of it. So I think the style of rugby league needs to change a little bit, adapt. And while we have got graceful skill, a lot of Aussies think that a lot of our backline is what they were classed as reserve grade, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. I actually think the quality level has decreased in the last decade or so. Absolutely, I'm not going to hide away from that fact. The Super League is not what it was when it was set up in '95. It has declined. I'm not hiding away from that fact, but it's a difficult one. I still think the NRL is the better competition, regardless of all the off-field antics of players in both here and in the Australia. And rugby league does have this image problem with player misbehaviour. It's not just an NRL thing. It's a rugby league thing, and I think attitudes need to change within the sport massively, because there are issues with player discipline and all that. But I do think if Toronto can make it to the Super League, I think style rugby league will change. We need to bring back some of that power game that we've been lacking. We have a lot of skilled players, a lot of players who are fleet of foot, but not enough of that brute force, which we've lost to the NRL. We've lost some of our most physical players to the NRL. And we need to try and find that next massive kind of machine, engine room, though, that big tank of a player or players who are just physical brute force. We need a bit more of that to balance out the skill side of it. The game in this country is more skill based. It's not a balanced squad setup as it is in the NRL. But the NRL is more power, and some of the skills that the wingers have are outstanding. But I still think Jermaine McGilvray will end up in the NRL at some point. I'm surprised he hasn't. There are some British players who I do think belong in the NRL, and I'm surprised haven't gone. Like Earl Crabtree, how he never went to the NRL is amazing, but his loyalty to Huddersfield was obvious. Favourite player, definitely would have been at home in the NRL as a forward. Absolute machine of a player, and how he didn't go to the NRL, I never know. Jermaine McGilvray, I think, is an NRL quality winger with his work ethic. But it is what it is. Like, we'll have to see what happens over the next coming years, whether the gap closes and whether like some of the NRL superstars do decide to come over to the UK to play, because I think that can also help if we got some of the big name NRL players. But they all seem to get homesick and depressed, want to go home and cancel their contracts. Whereas the English players who go over are quite happy to go over and stay long term, like the Burgess brothers and James Graham. They're quite happy to stay there for a long period of time. Josh Hodgson, they're happy to stay there for years. The Aussie players, I don't like it here, I'm going home. So there is that as well. He's trying to encourage the Australian players to stay long term. But that's my personal opinion. For now, I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to say thank you very much for all the questions and all the discussion. Some similar points from yesterday and some new points have I don't have mushy peas. Mushy peas are the food of the devil. But I've enjoyed the discussion today. Some interesting points were raised. Some interesting points were carried over from yesterday. Some new points have been raised. And we now know what toxic fan bases I don't like. I'm not here to cop abuse and death threats and stuff. And I'm very open in the fact that has tainted my opinion of certain fan bases. And unfortunately, that opinion is not going to change overnight. And to be honest, I'm probably going to keep that opinion for a long, long time. I try and be as neutral as unbiased as possible, but at the end of the day, there's one or two fan bases that make it so hard to be neutral and not opinionated. And I hope said teams lose now, just because. I think there's something about that particular nation and toxicity in certain parts of that nation and that nation's fan base, and it's mostly from the Cardiff, Swansea area that the toxicity comes from. And I feel sorry for those players who represent Wales, who, especially at rugby union, who have faced such vile abuse online from their own fans, to the point where they're like, I want to quit the sport that I love. I don't want to play anymore. That is something that really struck a chord with me, is when Reece Priestley said and Alex Cuthbert both come out and said we both nearly quit rugby union and converted to league, or nearly actually quit the sport altogether because of the vile abuse that we received on a regular basis whilst playing for the Welsh national side. That for me is a damning indictment of the behaviour of a sizable minority of their fans. And I've been on the backlash of it as well, and I've seen it on other social media. So at the end of the day, like, I'm not going to hold back in my criticism. I'm not going to hold back in my views, because I've had everything thrown at me by a proportion of people from said country. And I'm not going to hold back on my views. Personally, I think that minority has ruined it for the majority. And I've now made a view up of how toxic I think that massive minority are, because it's a big minority. It's not a very small number of people. It's a very big number of people in that sport and in that following that national team. But that's me. I'm off for now. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you all for the questions and discussion. And I'll have some more videos, obviously, for you very, very soon. But I've had some upload issues that I noticed last night after my last live stream. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of research into what's going on. But I've messaged YouTube, and they've actually said, they are aware of similar reports. So there is apparently an issue with uploading video content. So I'm going to upload this, let this process, and then later on this evening, I might post some more videos and more discussion points about various things, because I've got tomorrow off, so I can enjoy my bank holiday. For now, goodbye, and thank you for your participation.